All right, thanks everybody for joining the City of Courtenay for our September 8th, 2020 regular council meeting. I'd like to start just by acknowledging that we are meeting, Zooming, and streaming on the traditional unceded territories of the Comox First Nation. And with that, we'll go into adoption of minutes.
Excuse me, you don't need the coronavirus.
I skipped right over the whole, yeah, I'll read the preamble. Due to the coronavirus COVID-19 emergency, the City of Courtenay, with the authority of Ministerial Order M192, Local Government Meetings and Bylaw Process, Order Number 3, implemented changes to its open council meeting in the interest of public health and safety and in accordance with Section 3 of Ministerial Order Number 3 M192. In-person attendance by members of the public at council meetings will not be permitted until further notice. Council meetings will be presided over by the mayor or acting mayor with electronic participation by council and staff via live web streaming. Thanks, Councillor Hillian, for reminding me of that. And with that, we can move into adoption of minutes from August 17th.
I'll move adoption of the minutes for August 17th.
Second.
Moved by Councillor Theo, seconded by Councillor McCollum. Are there any questions, comments, or queries about those minutes? Seeing none, I will assume everybody is in favor of them unless I hear otherwise. Moving along, introduction of late items. Councillor Morin.
Great, thank you, Mayor. I'm just looking for my wording here. Yeah, I'd like to move that the Comox Valley Regional District CVRD development referral to regional local governments regarding 3L developments be added to tonight's agenda, please. Under new business.
All right. And that's been seconded by Councillor McCollum, I believe. And on this, I will poll council, starting with Councillor Cole Hamilton.
In favor.
Excuse me, Mayor, are we allowed to have any discussion or is it non-debatable?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'd looked at Mr. Richta, but I believe on new items it might be debatable. Mr. Richta, is it debatable?
Thank you, Mayor. If we bring it up under new item, then we can have it for discussion at that time.
So once it's actually voted on, then we can have the discussion about the item itself. So the first.
Well, excuse me, Mayor, but I'm asking whether the introduction of it is a late item. I have a question about that before voting on it.
Well, ask away.
Well, I'm just wondering if we can get any sense of why there's an urgency to bring it up as a late item. It's a matter of significant public interest, and I'm just concerned that if it appears on the agenda without being published ahead of time, that the public don't get the opportunity to see that we're actually talking about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, the intent of the motion was just to clarify what our process was with this. And so I believe we have staff prepared to talk about that. So it's not really talking about the our views on it. It's more around the process coming to us.
Yeah, I wonder then if the motion should specifically reference a particular development or just speak to how references come to us in general. Question for staff.
Mr. Richta or Mr. Kushner?
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I think give council more comfort if maybe you add something to the effect of the referral process. That might provide some more comfort. I spoke with Ian Buck, our Director of Development Services, earlier today, and he is prepared to speak to this item.
Yeah, I don't want to be too much of a nag here, but I am, I think, legitimately concerned about an item of such significant public interest appearing on the agenda without prior notice to the public. That's my only concern. If it's in general about how matters of development interest are referred to us and come before us on our agenda, then I'm totally in favor of it being added for discussion.
Well, I mean, if I respond to that, that's sort of getting into, this item wouldn't be on the agenda actually. This process was happening independent of council, correct me if I'm wrong, staff, that, yeah, I mean, it wasn't something that would be discussed. And I asked for it to be brought up.
I guess I just don't understand the urgency of bringing it up as a late item versus putting it on an agenda in the regular fashion. That's my question.
And Councillor Moore, I think when you originally brought this forward, I think the urgency was that there was a deadline for responding. Is that kind of what made it a little bit more urgent at the time? Given the fact that this is something that, as far as I know, and again, we're kind of getting into the weeds here, but staff have responded to that request. So I think we're okay in terms of meeting that deadline. So, you know, going back to Councillor Hillian, I don't know that there's a huge rush today. We do have 2 meetings after this one. So I do understand that, you know, if we wanted to push it to another meeting, but I think the staff response is going to be relatively simple, but I see Mr. Buck, you've taken your microphone off. Did you want to speak to it for a second?
Yeah, just very quickly, and again, to agree with Councillor Hillian, staff can bring forward a formal report on at the next council meeting. It's a fairly straightforward report. We've informally had discussions of what our referral response is likely to be with the CVRD. Cumberland, you've already seen their response, and Comox just did it at a staff level.
Is there a point of order here? Because we're getting into talking about when we haven't even voted on whether we're going to have it as a late item.
Well, and that's it. I mean, really, we're discussing on whether or not to have the vote. So really, it's been moved and seconded. I would say if somebody wants to call the question, and if not, I can call the question just to see if it makes it on as a late item, and then we can potentially have a further discussion later on, unless Councillor Moore and you'd rather shift it to a staff report at a future meeting.
I did have correspondence with staff about you know, some guidance on whether it was appropriate to bring as a late item, and it was. So that's sort of what I was going on. And really it was in the interest of transparency, because other local governments have already taken some action with this, and it was really about the process, not about getting into the discussion of the actual development. It was around how we came to the process that we did. And I thought that required some clarity.
Councillor Hillian,
Yeah, no, I'm fine with you conducting the vote, Mr. Mayor. I've asked my questions. That's fine.
Yep. Awesome. Okay. With that, I'll pull council. As long as there's no further questions, I don't see any other hands up. Starting with Councillor Cole Hamilton.
I think, sorry, just.
Sure.
I think given there is no deadline, and there's a possibility of a staff report which we can all review before the meeting so as to be fully briefed, I'd be more comfortable with doing that. So I guess I will not vote in favor then.
Okay, you're opposed. That sounds fine. Councillor Frisch, I think may have left the meeting and is trying to get back on. Councillor Hillian.
I'm opposed.
Councillor McCullum.
I'm in favor.
Councillor Morin.
In favor.
Councillor Theos. Sorry, you'll have to unmute yourself, Councillor Theos. I wish I could do it from here.
Thank you, Mayor. Sorry about that. Yeah, no, I'll wait for the report to come in also to get a little bit more updated on what's happening. So I'll be opposed at the moment.
All right, I'll vote in opposition for today, and then give staff a little bit more time to come forward with a report. Not as Councillor Morin said, it's not really just around 3L, but really around the whole process as well. And with that, we have no delegations today. And then we discussed varying the agenda. If somebody would like to vary the agenda for 6.2, the report around Fifth Street.
I can move that, Mayor. I'll move that we vary the agenda and move item 6.2, briefing note on the 5th Street Bridge Rehabilitation Project, from 6.0, internal reports and correspondence for information ahead on the agenda to be addressed before item 4.1.1, 5th Street Bridge Rehabilitation Project.
Second that.
Excellent. It is a simple procedure, so I'll assume that all council is in favor unless somebody waves their hands in opposition. And it looks like everybody's in favor. And so with that, we do have the staff report, so I'll pass it over to staff. Mr. Kushner.
Thank you, Mayor. With this intern, I'll pass this over to Chris Davidson to summarize the briefing note and take any questions from council.
Thank you, Trevor. Through the CAO to Mayor and Council, we're happy to present our briefing note on the traffic management strategy for the 5th Street Bridge rehabilitation and also to provide an update on the project. So the traffic management strategy serves as a guiding document for the traffic management during construction and will be included as part of the construction procurement process. Please note this is not the detailed traffic management plan that the contractor will use, but this will form the basis for it. So as part of this work, we re-engage with key stakeholders by sharing our traffic management strategy with them, asking for feedback, and also asking for them to join us in a meeting. So we're happy to meet with CBRD Transit. Overall, they were quite happy with the document. They especially liked our priority queue jumper lanes, and they did provide some comments which we're currently reviewing and considering for inclusion. We also met with the Cycling Coalition. Again, overall, they were happy with the strategy as proposed. They're especially happy about having full-time two-way access for the active transportation on the bridge deck for the majority of the project. We did not meet with DCBIA, but they did confirm that they received our traffic management strategy. One last point to highlight, this traffic management strategy as it is now is not written in stone. So there's still opportunities for further revision as design is finalized and also during contractor procurement and final negotiations. So without any further ado, I'll introduce our project team who is here today to present. We have Katie Hamilton from Tavola Strategy Group presenting, and she'll be supported by Dan Casey and Eric Sears, both from Urban Systems. So without any further ado, take it away, Katie.
Great, good afternoon, everyone. Here, I'm just going to share my screen.
Strangely,
Oh, sorry, I think I lost it. Just one moment.
it was kind of there, but it may have been one of those PowerPoint things where like it was showing the back end, not the front end.
Yeah, there we go. Can you see it again now?
Yep. Play from start. There we go. Looks perfect.
There we go. Good. Well, thank you very much. Nice to see you all again from afar. It's been a little while. Pleasure to be here today to provide an overview of the traffic management strategy in its current form. And as Chris said, supported today by Eric Sears and Dan Casey, my colleagues with Urban Systems, who will be happy to provide any answers to any questions you may have, in particular on the technical details of the strategy. The traffic management strategy has a number of key elements. General purpose traffic flow, the approach to how we will support priority vehicles within the community, commercial vehicles and oversized, active transportation in the forms of people who walk and cycle, access to the park, and transportation demand management. Now, you'll recall planning for this the traffic management plan itself really started in the fall of 2019 with early consultation with the broad community at an open house, a survey, and through face-to-face meetings with a variety of local stakeholders. So a really key element in the process was, I think, really trying to best understand the community's needs prior to really putting pen to paper. And I think the traffic management plan as outlined today is responsive to the input received in those early conversations. And the three main considerations we really heard from the community was, number one was to reduce congestion and maintain access for all modes. That the community feels adjustments in travel behavior will be expected, including consideration of new routes and allowing for additional time, and as well as the really important element of maintaining priority for those key transportation services, emergency services, school buses, BC Transit, and the like. And then again, as Mr. Davidson shared, we just recently shared the traffic management plan that's in front of you with the community to welcome additional feedback and dialogue. So the results of the traffic evaluation showed that single lane alternating traffic pattern was the preferred option for managing traffic and addressing the key considerations raised by the community during construction. And the next few slides will outline the various elements associated with that single lane alternating model. So in terms of general purpose traffic flow, leaving downtown, it'll be 5th Street eastbound towards the bridge, will be closed at Cliff Avenue, except to local traffic. There'll be a detour route traveling north on Cliff Avenue, right on 3rd Street, and left into the laneway between Cliff and Anderton Avenues, right on 1st Street, and then finally right onto Anderton Avenue. This will minimize impacts to business and provide storage for most traffic queues on Anderton Avenue instead of 5th Street. Entering downtown, there aren't any significant changes to current traffic patterns for general purpose traffic flow that have been identified. And so this is very much sort of the status quo in terms of what travelers currently experience. And then when looking at priority vehicles, those would be categorized as anything that includes public transit, emergency services, so police, fire, ambulance, the public school buses, and potentially, depending on traffic demand strategies, carpool or high occupancy vehicles. So entering downtown, there would be a dedicated priority vehicle lane on Old Island Highway from Ryan Road to the bridge. And that would enable BC Transit and those emergency services to bypass the general traffic queues. Locating the priority vehicle lane in the curb on the right lane would allow vehicles traveling to Lewis Park to also use the priority vehicle lane. Leaving downtown, transit will need to be rerouted to leave downtown via 1st Street and Anderton Avenue. And as two-way traffic is being maintained on Anderton Avenue, in addition to the bridge queue, priority vehicles can use the travel lane to bypass the queue and get to the front of the line for the bridge. Now, in terms of commercial and oversized vehicles, as you know, in order to complete the work safely, the bridge will need to be scaffolded, I guess, which will reduce the maximum height of vehicles that can travel across the bridge. And so that maximum height will be 3.6 meters due to the scaffolding, and the scaffolding, once installed, stays in place for the duration of the work. And so there will be some large vehicles that are not able to use the 5th Street Bridge. One example would be the ladder truck for the fire department. These vehicles will need to use the 17th Street Bridge. And we have been in, obviously, conversation with the fire department and with stakeholders that may be affected. And there'll be a lot of ongoing dialogue about encouraging use of the alternate route. Large vehicles that can use the 5th Street Bridge may be detoured down 6th Street due to turning limitations in the 3rd Street laneway. And so again, that will be a focus for proactive communication and ongoing dialogue. And signage and proactive communication will need to be developed as part of the communication strategy. Once we're through the borrowing bylaw and have a contract in place, there will be a very detailed communications plan that will be developed. When we're looking at pedestrians and cyclists, or anyone who really walks, cycles, or rolls across the bridge, in addition to maintaining the vehicle traffic through construction, the traffic management successfully accommodates continuous safe access for all active transportation modes. And so during the recoding phase, when the bridge is coating surface is being redone. Pedestrians and cyclists will have full-time two-way access to cross the bridge on the bridge deck. And then during the redecking phase, when we replace the roadway, pedestrians and cyclists will have full-time two-way access to cross the bridge on the existing walkways. Access to Lewis Park and or Millennium Sims Park parking lots will be maintained for park users and as a potential park and ride or park and walk / bike location. Traffic accessing the parking lots could be permitted to utilize the priority vehicle lane, as we mentioned, which would provide a time savings and incentive to bike or walk across the bridge. There are options for transportation mode shift that can be explored in the coming months and in conjunction as well with the successful contractor. These could include park and ride, encouraging higher use of transit, ride share, or carpooling, shuttle, park and walk and bike, as well as encouraging folks to introduce new travel schedules or considering different time of day travel or allowing more time for travel. In terms of the budget and funding, there are no changes in this slide. This is what you have seen in the past and no foreseen changes to the estimates or the budget. So just as a touchstone, the bridge recoating and deck renewal is 4.1 million, structural and traffic improvements 2.2 for a total project cost of 6.3 million. The City of Courtenay has been successful in receiving a federal provincial grant of 1.96 million and will be accessing the city's reserves for 0.94. The city borrowing amount remains at 3.4 million, and what that means for the average residential property is $13 per year, and for the average commercial property, I believe it's 82. In terms of the project timeline, just again, another touchstone, there's ongoing communications and public consultation largely throughout the project. And as we work through the borrowing bylaw process, and should the process be successful, move into procurement and then preparation for construction and active construction, that communications will increase with more detail to share with the community. In the coming weeks, I understand there will be an update to council around the borrowing process and the alternative approval process. And in a parallel track, the design team will be finalizing the design and working on those procurement documents that will be necessary to go to tender. It is expected that the construction would start in the second quarter of 2021 and be active quarter 3, with the project closing out by the end of next year. And the next steps, as I just noted, is to be back in front of council with details around that AAP borrowing process. The complete design and procurement package will be developed. We'll begin contractor procurement later in this year, and construction will start in the second quarter of 2021. And with that, I will pause, and I know our team would be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Excellent. Thanks very much. Really appreciate it. And I do see that Councillor McCollum has a question or comment.
Thanks, Mayor, and thanks for the presentation, Katie. I have a couple of questions just on how we're going to manage some of the impacts to pedestrian and cycling traffic as we implement. I think the first question that's top of mind for me is if we're routing traffic leaving downtown, turning left at the 5th and Cliff intersection, is there planned improvements for pedestrian crossing there? Currently, we only have three directions that pedestrians can cross, and it's programmed for a heavy left-hand turn onto Cliff off 5th Street. Now we're going to have traffic doing the opposite, and it just seems to me that if we're going to try and encourage people to park and walk over from the Lewis Park side, that we need to look at how pedestrians are getting across that crosswalk.
Yeah, great question. Thank you very much. Happy to answer that. Through the CAO to Mayor and Council, yeah, traffic control out there is going to look very different during the construction phase. So there likely won't be any permanent traffic control changes, but there will be significant temporary traffic control changes. Based on our document now and our current planning, we're envisioning quite a few traffic controllers, people on site watching, temporary signals, as well as temporary traffic indicators. So yeah, that will definitely be accounted for and considered, absolutely.
So to clarify, we're planning on having traffic controllers both at the 5th and Cliff intersection as well as the Anderton and 5th one, or did I misunderstand that?
No, that's exact details are yet to be determined. So that's going to depend on final scope for construction, final details with the contractor, how they propose to control it. But the whole area is going to be very, very tightly controlled and monitored because it is a very complicated project. There's going to be a lot of changes down there that people aren't used to. So it's going to be challenging, but we're going to be very proactive in that regard.
That's great to hear. Thank you. Another question around how we're going to manage this piece. When pedestrian and cycling traffic is going to be traveling in their separated lane, I think it's showing as the upstream side of the bridge. Is the expectation then that to continue on up 5th Street that that traffic will need to be routed under the 5th Street underpass, or will they be able to continue up 5th Street as they're traveling, or is there going to be a little detour as they exit the bridge?
No, cyclists will be allowed to travel up 5th Street as they exit the bridge.
Great. Okay, I'll leave my questions there and let everyone have a turn, and I have a couple more if they don't get asked by somebody else. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor McCollum. And next we have Councillor Frisch.
Thanks, Mayor, and my apologies for the IT issues. I lost connection there for a bit. I hope I didn't miss anything. Was anything said about me while I was gone?
No, not nothing. You can always stream this later.
No one even noticed I wasn't here. Well, thanks, Katie, for the presentation and staff. Really happy to see the priority for pedestrians and cyclists. And I had two questions. One was about the priority route for priority traffic. I guess that's mainly buses. And you can clarify if there's anything else included in that for me. Is there any contemplation of a priority route beyond 5th Street and Ryan Road, sort of that T intersection where buses are coming down Ryan Road a lot? And obviously there's 2 lanes there, so that might solve some of the issue, but then getting into that intersection, have we contemplated if there's going to be backups there, how we can prioritize that traffic there?
Great questions, thank you. Through the CAO to Mayor and Council, to answer your first question, yes, there will be other priority traffic in the priority lanes, specifically emergency services, also school district buses. And depending on how it goes, we may open it up to high occupancy vehicles. To answer your second question, that same question was actually raised by CBRD Transit, and we're currently reviewing and considering. We believe now it may be possible, but we're still confirming details. So I might actually push that one over to Dan Casey to speak to a little bit, if you don't mind, Dan.
Sure. Thanks, Chris. So everything is completely accurate. It's a little bit of details to be confirmed. Now, historically, there has been an idea thrown around about a possible transit or even high occupancy vehicle queue jump lane on the Ryan Road leg of Ryan Road, Old Island Highway. So there might be potential something like that. It's not necessarily included in the package currently, something that could be given further consideration. Other than that, a lot of the queue happens on the Ryan Road corridor, starts at the Old Island Highway section, goes Island Highway way up. And so you start getting into some pretty heavy volumes as you work your way up Ryan Road. So any sort of queue jump or priority vehicle priority would take away from general purpose travel. Is already quite congested through that corridor.
Well, thanks for the response. And the second other question I have is about support for downtown businesses. And I know it doesn't necessarily fall under the traffic heading, but of course, I know this council has shown a lot of support for downtown and wants to make sure that people still feel like it's a convenient place to visit. And have we given any contemplation to that in this traffic management plan?
Another great consideration. The answer is strongly yes. So we specifically designed this traffic management strategy so that we don't have traffic backing all the way up 5th Street and blocking off access to stores. We've also designed it in such a way that once people are through the bridge, they can access shops downtown as quickly as possible. Further, as part of our communications plan going forward, we'll be highlighting access routes to reach downtown and hopefully it's still encouraging people to access downtown as they need.
Well, I really appreciate that. I think that should be a strong focus in our communications, and also those options that it looks like we're still looking into, like park and ride, like other easy ways to get across the bridge and visit downtown. I think that's really important. So thanks for doing that.
Excellent. And next we have Councillor Cole Hamilton.
Yeah, thanks very much, Mayor. And thanks so much. This is an incredibly detailed report. I can see that a lot of thought has gone into every mode of transportation. I wanted to talk a bit about the park and ride, and there was some discussion there of possibly allowing people to have reduced cost or free use of BC Transit buses. Is there, do we have any idea of, or if we've modeled what the costs might be on that? I mean, I can see a strong upside to getting people to park and then come across the river in buses rather than individual motor vehicles. Do we know what the costing on that might look like?
Great question. No, we don't know the exact costing, what that would look like. That's yet to be modeled. So that'll be developed further as we proceed with finishing the design. And then in more detail, once we get through the borrowing process and once we secure a contractor. So we've discussed this at a very high level with CVRD Transit through our stakeholder engagement with them. They know it's on our radar. They know it's something we want to work with them on. So we're looking forward to getting into details as the project.
Okay, thank you. I think another question I was going to ask, it follows up on that in terms of reduced or cost or free use of buses. I noted that it says that you're going to be working with SD71, the school district, to possibly try and stagger bell times so as to reduce kind of a push all at one time. That seems a really, really wise approach. I'm wondering if there's any possibility perhaps of SD71 being able to generate a list of students who live on the opposite side of the river from the schools they're going to, and perhaps we could target those families for discounted or free school passes. If you've gone anywhere close to that, how have your discussions with SD71 gone, and do you think they'd be receptive to that sort of an arrangement like that?
Another great question. Discussions with SD71 have been fairly informal to date, and definitely not to that level. So we'll be exploring options like that going forward. Looking for any possible solutions we can. We're open to any and all good ideas at this point in time.
Okay, and if we ask one more question and then I'll pass it on to others. There'd also been talk just on that sort of staggered times of working, looking at local employers and seeing if it's possible for them to be staggering times. I imagine that given the experience of COVID, which we hadn't expected to have under our belts before this happened, that it's probably a lot more comfort with working from home and flexibility. Could part of our engagement plan be to work with major employers on a staggered work time plan, just to coordinate that for sort of North Island College, the hospital, the big employers that take people across the bridge?
It could be. We're not quite to that level of detail. Again, we have reached out to the base, for example, to see if there's any opportunities there. Haven't gotten a lot of feedback from them, but we're definitely going to be reaching out through our communications plan and our ongoing stakeholder engagement plan. So yeah, to be explored further in the future.
Okay, well, I have a couple more questions, but I'll just cede the floor for a while, maybe come back for another round. Thank you.
Thanks for that. And Councillor McCollum, you did say that others could go, so I'm going to let Councillor Hillian have the floor.
Thanks, Mayor, and thanks for an excellent report. Two questions. First of all, I may have missed it, but I'm not sure if there was any reference to siting requirements for the construction crews with equipment and supplies and machinery. Is there going to be a need for that off the bridge? And if so, where is that going to be and how will it impact the traffic management?
Great question. Yes, there definitely will be a requirement for sitting/laydown areas. And so we're envisioning those to be sharing some of the parking lots within Sims and Lewis Park there. Also probably occupying some of the space underneath the bridge. We are intending to keep at least one lane open underneath the bridge.
So that'll effectively take away some of the parking access in the parks, and I know you're going to close the park access at certain times as well. So obviously lots of public communication needed in relation to that. My other question is regarding the park and ride and those options. I noticed that in the public engagement, you didn't get a lot of uptake for people who said that they would use transit or shuttle services and such as an alternative. So I certainly would concur with Councillor Cole Hamilton's suggestion that we encourage incentives. And I'm wondering if that there might be some work done with downtown business to create incentives such as reduced pricing, complimentary coffee, whatever, to people who demonstrate that they've traveled by park and ride or transit.
Possible at this point. Still a little early for us to be diving down to that level of detail. With your original statement that the number one concern we heard back from the public during our original round of stakeholder engagement was to minimize impacts to traffic. So that was the focus of this document. However, we did take into consideration, as many other users as possible.
Right. Yes, but minimal impact to traffic so that people can continue driving cars. And I think what we're all hoping is that we can encourage some changes of behavior to cut down on the number of individual cars going across, and therefore cut down on the delays that will take place and the need for the queuing that is obviously required.
Completely agree with that statement, and that's definitely going to be one of the core messages of our communications program going forward. Anything we can do to get people out of their cars and off the bridge, I think the easier it'll be for the rest of the community.
Thanks very much.
Excellent. Thanks, Councillor Hillian. Next, we have, I'll pass it over to Councillor Theos.
Thank you very much, Mayor. I appreciate the answers, Chris, very thorough answers. Thank you very much. My question's in regards to, I would assume that we have communication with our facilities such as the Philberg and the CRA and Sid Williams, et cetera, to keep their clients engaged and in the know of what times are probably the most appropriate and best times to have their clients come to their facilities. But my question would be also in regards to communication with the tourism in the Comox Valley and economic development, also the Builders Association, and there will be construction that's occurring throughout the community, but also in the downtown area, potentially through that time period. But also when we're trying to promote the community in an effective and efficient way, either to tourism or to economic development. I'm wondering with those agencies, what type of communication will be laid out? If you can touch on that, please.
Absolutely. So to answer your first question regarding communications with Philberg and Sid Williams, not a ton to date beyond the public open house and also online engagement. So we've really been focusing on our core stakeholders who rely on the bridge to keep their systems operating. Second question regarding tourism, economic development. So we have been in contact with Comox Valley Chamber of Commerce. And we were going to work with them to do basically a media blast to the truckers group. I forgot the name of them, unfortunately. We've been hesitant to roll out any serious communications plan at this point in time. There's still quite a few variables open in the project. Specifically, I'm referencing the upcoming borrowing process and also the procurement process. So depending how both of those go, it may impact the scope of the project. So we didn't want to get too far ahead of ourselves in that regard. Circling back to your second question, tourism in the Comox Valley. I don't think there's any two ways around it. This is definitely going to have an impact on vehicle travel in the Comox Valley next summer. It's unfortunate. We're essentially trying to make the best of a bad situation. It is definitely going to be very impactful for the community, and people are going to notice it.
Thank you, Chris.
Excellent. Next, back to Councillor McCollum.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I just have a question around how the priority vehicle or the queue jumping lane is going to work on the Old Island Highway side of the bridge. I think it's a really important approach that we have something like that to encourage people to think more innovatively about how to get to downtown. But we also would like to see as many people using cycling as an option, but I'm having a hard time imagining how we could safely have cyclists traveling on that corridor if it's 3 lanes of traffic, and I'm just wondering if that's been considered and whether we have a solution for that at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. So to answer the question, there's already actually 3 lanes of traffic out there now. It's a 3-lane cross section. So it should be easy to maintain the existing flow. Basically, the center lane that is left turn in both directions, that's going to be for general purpose traffic heading across the bridge. Priority lane will be in the current general purpose traffic lane in the right-hand side, closest to Lewis Center there. So the current bike lane that's there now will still be there going forward. We'll make sure to highlight that appropriately. Maybe I can hand it over to Dan Casey again, just to speak to that traffic flow in a little more detail.
Yeah, sure. So thanks, Chris. You're absolutely right. I guess more of a, it's no better, it's no worse than it is today. That maybe the one redeeming piece is that compared to today, that inbound lane is going to actually have, so the curb during construction, the curb lane in the inbound direction would be the high occupancy vehicle. And so that'll actually have fewer vehicles in it. So buses, emergency services, potentially carpool and ride share, that piece is to be confirmed. But there'll be less vehicles occupying that lane during construction than there is in the today in the current inbound lane. And yes, bikes are still going to have a pretty marginal facility, we'll say, on that approach, but there will be less traffic there than it is today or has been in past. So there's a little bit of benefit from that perspective.
That makes sense. I realize these are kind of early phase sketches, but it does show the priority lane going all the way to kind of where that interchange is at Sims. And as it is now, it's actually kind of tight with 2 lanes of traffic just beyond that, that first light as you approach 5th Street. So I'm not sure if that's, I mean, not that I've stood there and really looked at it. I know there's a right-hand turn lane on the far side, but yeah, I'm just having a hard time imagining how we'll be able to maintain that approaching the bridge, or if it'll have to merge with traffic a bit earlier. Anyway, I just thought I'd bring it up.
Okay, fair comment. And as you alluded to, we're still a little early, and this isn't a super detailed document. This is just the purposes to show the core concept that we have in mind for traffic flows. So the lane might not go all the way back to that intersection, but that's what we're shooting for. We're going to do as best as we can.
Sounds great. Thanks.
All right, excellent. And Councillor Frisch.
Yeah, thanks again, Mayor. So I've written in some shared priority lanes in Paris, actually, and it was a very positive experience where cyclists share a lane with buses, and it works quite well. I'm sure our bus drivers will be as gracious as theirs. Is that sort of what we envision for the priority lane and the westbound traffic, priority traffic and cyclists and such?
Yes, it is. So in discussions with the Cycling Coalition, that's what we messaged forward was the bike lane, the existing bike lane would be there, but they'd also have the opportunity to take the lane of the priority lane, as it were, and ride behind priority vehicles. Frankly, after talking it out, it sort of sounded like we came to the conclusion that it'd probably be faster than to just scoot around in their own bike lane now and sort of advance to the front of the queue and then go across the bridge. But they're certainly welcome to take a priority lane.
I'm sorry, can you just clarify for me what bike lane are you talking about?
I'm talking about the bike lane on the park side that approaches the bridge.
Oh, I wasn't aware of a bike lane.
Oh, sorry. Not a denoted bike lane. The side of the road, basically, where cyclists currently. Right. Yeah, I should be more clear. Sorry about that. Good catch.
More like a filter.
Yeah, that's
also known as the gutter.
There you go. Yeah. Okay, I wasn't gonna say it.
Well, Public Works knows.
Yeah.
All right. And then. And have you guys looked into options to do sort of a temporary delineated bike lane with temporary bollards or something like that? I mean, I imagine it'd be a tight fit, but has that been contemplated?
Yes, currently being reviewed. It would be temporary in nature. Might not be bollards per se, but something of that nature, just for a little more separation. Again, still being reviewed. Please keep in mind this is a very high-level document, so we've still got a few details to work through. But yes, we are looking at that.
Well, thank you for the effort. I appreciate it.
Excellent. And Councillor Cole Hamilton.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I just had a question also about that lane. One of the suggestions which I thought seemed promising was the idea that people who are going to use who are going to be park and then walk or bike across the bridge, that they might be allowed access that priority access lane, so they could get to the base of the bridge and then walk or cycle across. But that would obviously increase the amount of traffic in that lane that we've just been discussing and make it more complex given the lack of an actual bike lane. The current vision is just that it would simply be emergency vehicles and buses. If we're then to add priority access for people who are parking and then taking active transportation across the bridge, is there capacity for all those uses of that lane?
Great question. Currently, we believe yes, if it's managed properly. However, big asterisk, there's going to be a lot of observation and management real time in the field as it all comes together. So depending on loading of those lanes, how much people are willing to use transit, it could be highly variable. So the short answer is we're going to have a lot of traffic management people out there making sure things are flowing as they should be. We're going to start off with a more reserved approach, just keep priority vehicles in the priority lane, not open it up to HOV vehicles right from the beginning. And then depending on how things flow, we may open it up and monitor the situation basically. So it's going to be a little bit of real-time management out there and adapting to the situation as it develops.
Okay, all right. Thanks very much, Chris.
All right, and Councillor Frisch again.
Yeah, just a quick question about traffic related to people tubing the river, and seeing as this will be in sort of the middle of summer, have you kind of looked at that aspect of it? All the people that are accustomed to parking down at Lewis and pulling people out of the river and shuttling and all the rest.
Yes, we have considered that, as long as a few other celebrations and activities that are typically planned for the park in the summertime. Unfortunately, that's going to be a part of our messaging, our communications program, is that there will be limited access, both due to traffic access, available parking, and then just due to contractors work in the area. So unfortunately, it is going to have an impact. This project is going to have an impact on the area. It's likely going to restrict some of those activities.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, as usual, a lot of it comes down to communications. So thanks for looking into that.
That's the main thing. We want to get in front of it and be proactive and let people know. Our worst case is we have everyone descends on downtown and finds out at the last minute, and then it's
so big colorful signs will be a big part of this, I imagine, all over both sides of the bridge.
Well, yes, not just the bridge, all related detour routes, areas where you'd be considering accessing the bridge. We'll probably be doing radio ads, social media, probably a few other things too, maybe pop-up booths. We're considering a little bit of everything. We really need to be shouting it from the rooftops that this is going to have an impact, and it's really going to affect the way things flow down there.
Excellent, thanks.
Excellent. And I don't see any further questions right now. Just to confirm, we did move the briefing note up so that could be put before the engineering traffic management.
If you like, Mr. Mayor, I'll move receipt of the briefing note.
Thank you, sir.
Second.
All right. And since it is just a briefing note, I'll assume everybody is in acceptance of its approval. And Councillor Frisch.
Yeah, my apologies. I just wanted to confirm that budgeting related to communications will reflect that in our upcoming budget next year.
Good point.
Yes, it will. We do have communications allocated in our upcoming budget, so we should have resources to support that effort.
Excellent. All right. So we've accepted the briefing notes, and then on to the traffic management strategy presentation. But actually, we've kind of done both, all of it at once, I think. So I just want to check with Mr. Ritsta, is there anything that we need to do with 4.11? Because we kind of varied the agenda, but we've kind of consolidated, I think, both of them into one discussion. Does that make sense?
Yes, Mayor, thank you for the question. We can also receive the presentation materials. That can be done by resolution, or I can just make a notation that it was unanimously agreed to receive.
All right. Councillor Frisch has moved it. If somebody wants to second it, and we'll just consider it done.
Seconded.
Excellent. All right. We'll assume that everybody's in favor since it is just for receipt. And if there's no further questions, I guess we'll say thanks very much for the great presentation. I know there's a lot of work and thought, and obviously the word that came up over and over again is communication. So I think we'll all be hopefully rowing in the same direction and making sure that we try to do this as effectively as possible and communicate with those that are going to be affected. So thanks very much for the presentation today. With that, we can go into COVID-19 recovery policy for indoor facilities.
Thank you, Mayor. With that, I'll pass it over to Dave Snyder to summarize the report and take any questions that council may have.
CEO to Mayor and Council. There's a fair bit in this report, and so if you'll indulge me, I'll take a few minutes and summarize for those that are watching at home and make sure that there's clarity on what's in the report. During a healthcare crisis, it's important that people are healthy in their lifestyles and that they have good lifestyle options, especially as we enter into the fall and winter this season. Indoor opportunities will become more important. Indoor rec services were suspended when COVID hit us in March, and so as part of that, this report identifies 3 service areas that we're looking at opening back up: indoor recreation programming, preschool services, and facility rentals. The delivery of these services will be in line with industry guidelines from the BC Recreation and Parks Association, WorkSafe BC, the BC Municipal Safety Association, Facilities Association of BC, along with guidance from the province and always in keeping with ministerial orders. The opening of each service started out with a risk analysis done by staff, and then the development of a safety plan per area. And so we have a substantial document now of safety plans. I'm going to go through each one of these service areas, starting with the preschool. Cozy Corner Preschool has regular subscribers, but there are still a number of spaces available. Staff anticipate that these spaces will fill up, especially as school year is starting. Users will drop off their kids outside and pick them up outside of the facility as well, and come into a door. The kids will come into a door directly from the parking lot beside the wheelchair ramp at Lewis Center. In terms of best practices, I know preschool is confusing for many people as we talk about a 2-meter distance and social distance and physical distancing between people. Preschools operate more like schools. We're working from best practices that are identified by the province for summer camps and daycares and preschools. It identifies that staff are to stay 2 meters apart wherever possible, understanding that there are some times when you hand a child from one staff member to another and those distances are not possible to maintain. With children, the preferred approach is to avoid contact child to child where possible. There is a link in the staff report with more detail if council or the public would like to look into those guidelines in more detail. For rentals, of course, as we see across the province, no more than 50 people in any particular rental. Fall is a busy time for rentals, and although there would be reduced numbers, we are anticipating a lot of interest in rentals this fall, particularly at the Florence Filberg Center and Native Sons Hall. All renters would be required to sign a new rental agreement, which includes a COVID attachment as well, submit a safety plan as well as an exposure control plan, and then contact tracing information as well. We do expect strong interest, and our larger rooms, of course, a lot of people that would normally have met in a smaller meeting room will be looking for a larger room to do so because of room capacities that are reduced now. In terms of indoor programming, homes within the area will have received the regional rec guide by now. Registration day was on August 31st. The programs that were chosen for this session are based on successful past performance. These are programs that have either sold out often in the past or even have waiting lists in the past, because we're trying to ensure that that the programs are successfully subscribed so that they don't need to be canceled. Any programs that don't meet minimum subscriptions will be canceled to ensure that we're not creating a financial burden to the taxpayer by undersubscribed programs. There are some programs that you'll see in the guide that are free to the public. Those are provided via grants. So we have grants that are encouraging people to get involved in free programming for the sake of their health and wellness. So those ones don't have minimums and won't be canceled on the basis of minimums because they're already covered by grant. Some programs are shown as drop-in, but there is really no functional drop-in in the traditional sense. In this scenario, everyone is registering online or by phone in advance. And so any program, again, in advance of the program being executed that doesn't meet minimums will be canceled. There won't be lineups outside the door trying to get in with untold numbers. We should be able to very effectively predict exactly who's coming because they will have all been enrolled. Trainers and instructors will have iPads to be able to see who's enrolled in the program and who's not, and send those back that weren't enrolled and confirm enrollment on those that had. A little bit more, I'm just about there. Users will enter the building from the outside of the building. I want council to be aware that we're not necessarily kicking the doors open and operating as a community center just yet. In the past, we've done an evaluation of the Lewis Center using it as an example and found that there are a lot of outside doors. And we had seen this as a weakness to the building in the past because there's a lot of people coming and going via outside doors. In COVID times, this is actually an advantage for us. So as people come to their class, they'll park in the parking lot and they'll walk around the building to the outside door that lets them directly into their class. Come to their class, the instructor will meet them with the iPad, ask them the health questions that they need to be asked, and they'll be admitted into their class. After the class is done, they leave via the same door and go back to the car. So there should be minimal interaction on the inside hallways. Inside hallways will be used for washroom access and for some limited access to staff who, as you saw in the report, are behind plexiglass now and safely operating. This approach will evolve over time. I know that as ministerial orders continue to come down, in the case of even a localized outbreak, we'll evolve our approach. But if things open up a little bit more, we'll continue to evolve as well. Council has been provided financial projections in the report as well to give you a sense of what our projections are to finish out 2020. And then a few general comments. Workstations have been modified, which I commented on. Custodial staff have done a wonderful job of deep cleaning the facilities. So each of the facilities are sparkly clean. Room capacities have been reestablished with COVID in mind. And participants will be asked those medical questions in two ways. One is in person, as I already described, but also when they register for a program, they'll be identifying that they don't have any symptoms. And then lastly, contact tracing for participants will be through our booking software. And so through our software, we have all of the information that we need for contact tracing and can notify people if there is an outbreak in the region. I have our manager of programming, Kathy Collins, online as well as Carol Miller, our manager of facility operations, if you stump me on any questions. And so I'll turn it over to you now. Mayor.
Oh, thank you. Sorry, I thought you were turning it over to the person. We have a couple of questions here, starting with Councillor Morin.
Great, thank you, Mayor. Thanks for the report, Dave. Yeah, I was wondering, I know the regional district, of course, had their fitness equipment in the large space in the sports center, which provided really good distance apart. I guess we don't really have the ability to do that is my first question. And then I also wondered whether the doors are open to the fitness center in the good weather, if there's a way to get more air circulating. The reason I bring these things up is because there was the one outbreak in the Okanagan that was, well, it was, I think, a group of people who had frequented a few different places, and one of them was a gym. And of course, gyms do get pretty moist, people eat moistly, etc. there. So I'm just wondering if those kinds of things have been considered to mitigate some of the potential of transmission.
Thank you for the question. We do have a separate report that's just after this report dealing with the wellness center.
Yes, I'm ahead of myself. Right. I'm sorry about that.
A little bit, but I do. You do raise a good point about air circulation, and so all of the or most of the rooms that we're booking are on outside walls, and so air circulation can definitely be taken into consideration.
Right, and you can address my question in the next section if you want on the rest of it. Thank you.
That will do.
Excellent, thanks. And Councillor Hillian.
Thank you, Mayor, and thanks to staff for the report. Two questions. First of all, I'm just wondering what the impact is on the link, which is the center for many of our youth programs. And I understand that some of that has been drop-in the past. And, you know, we're working with, in some cases, young people there who may not be all that adept or inclined to formally register.
Excellent question. The link is unique in its operation. It's there's several considerations. It is dominantly drop-in. There are some registered programs as well, but the main use is drop-in, and we know from working with youth for years, having them enroll a few days in advance is not a practical approach. In fact, I know with my kids, it's the day of, in fact, the hour of, to determine whether they want to do something or don't want to do it. And so we're still working on how that would shake out. There's a lot of thought to go into that. Having said that, it does concern us because we're coming to fall. We know that that there's a need for youth programming throughout the year, but especially as we come into the wetter weather. And so I'll just toss this over to Kathy as well, if you'd like to comment on your progress so far or thoughts to date, Kathy.
Thanks, Dave. So through the CAO to Mayor and Council, staff are currently working on scenarios with the hopes of getting something in front of Council shortly. We've got a couple of very creative processes in place, and thankfully we've got software to help us navigate some of the difficulties with that. And then in the absence of software, we might just go right to our good old contact tracing paperwork, just so that we have record of who's in there.
Thanks very much. I appreciate that you're working on that. My second question relates to the access to the showers in the Lewis Center and access in general, but specifically with regards to the programming that's been made available for people who are, sleeping rough. And I believe there's been a program that's been administered by Transition Society with grant funding during this period, and whether or not that's going to continue, I'm curious.
We don't have an end date in terms of the maturation of that shower program. For those that aren't familiar with it, the Transition Society is running a shower program for those that are living without housing out of the west end of the Lewis Center, coming directly off the park. That's been successful. I understand their numbers are substantially lower than what we've experienced in the past for whatever reason. But we don't have a plan for exactly when that would end. At this point, I guess it depends on how much and what type of programming we offer in that end of the building, because those washrooms are the ones that are used by our gymnasium users as well. We may be able to segment off the showers from the washrooms so that the washrooms are accessible from the inside, the showers are accessible from the outside. So we'll continue to work on that with the Transition Society. We do like that it operates well that way. The other component to this is we are trying to discourage flow of folks through the hallways without a particular program to go to. So they are a relief valve for that need. And that's a good thing for us in this scenario. So we'll continue to work with them on that.
Thanks very much.
Excellent. And Councillor McCullum.
Thanks, Mayor. And yeah, thanks for the staff report on Mr. Schneider. It's really great to see what the plans are for reopening the rec facilities. I know lots of people have been looking forward to getting back to the gym and resuming various activities that take place there. I'm sure you're maybe not surprised that I'm going to ask about the squash facilities. I've had a number of inquiries from my fellow squash players in town, and people are anxiously awaiting a return to their sport as well. And I wasn't clear if, in reading the report, if squash court bookings would fall under facility rentals or if that's going to be handled separately. I can't hear you.
Your microphone, Mr. Snyder, it's a little, it cuts in and out a little bit. Once you get going, it seems okay, but right now you seem pretty quiet.
I'm just going to turn it up. Tell me if that sounds better.
Not really.
Yeah.
I'll try speaking. I'll speak loud, and hopefully that works.
Yeah, and it might also be if your speakers are too loud. Sometimes a speaker is trying to noise cancel and be all smart and stuff and has a challenge. So, but if we have challenges, we'll let you know.
Sounds good. I'll turn down my volume and I'll turn up my microphone. Excellent. So back to squash. Squash is difficult. Squash is in the center of the building, has limited ventilation, and is a contact sport. Involves a lot of sweat, and also has social components to it as well. So we are kind of folding it into this report in that it's an indoor recreation activity, but we're not planning squash activities in the short term. Staff are meeting with the squash club representatives to talk about what safe return to sport would look like for squash, and then we'll proceed on the basis of an appropriate safety plan.
Okay, that's great to hear. So there is dialogue going on between that user group and staff. So that's great to hear. I know that there are squash facilities on the island that are municipally owned that have opened. And yeah, I realize that basically until we have a vaccination, that it is going to be a sport that's has some level of risk just due to the fact that it's in a box with quite a bit of sweat. But it is 2 people at a time too, at small groups. So hopefully we can find a way to get people back on court. Thank you.
And one other comment on that, it is an area that we haven't received clear guidance from industry on. And so each municipality is making their own decision, and it puts us in an awkward spot. But we're hoping that these conversations with squash will help clarify that for us.
Yeah, I have received emails from Squash BC around their return phase, and yeah, it doesn't line up with some of the things that I've seen from Soccer BC. So it seems like, yeah, depending on what the type of sport is, the guidance seems to be a little bit different. So I do recognize that there is quite a bit to wade through here. So yeah, thank you.
All right, excellent. And Councillor Hillian.
Mayor, I'd be willing to read the recommendation at this point if you think that's appropriate.
I think this is as good a time as any. We can still continue having a conversation, but let's get that motion on the table.
I'll move that based on the September 8th, 2020 staff report, as noted on page 18 of the agenda, COVID-19 recovery plan policy indoor recreation facility use, council approve option 1 as follows. That per orders and requirements of the provincial and federal authorities to maintain physical distancing and restrict public gatherings related to the spread of the COVID-19, and as imposed by extraordinary powers adopted March 18th, 2020 under the BC Provincial State of Emergency. And whereas the provincial BC Restart Plan COVID-19 has entered phase 3, which under enhanced protocols allows the return to provision of certain services, including preschool, childcare, indoor recreational programming, and facility rentals. Therefore be it resolved that effective immediately, council authorize the reopening of the city's recreation facilities for the purpose of preschool childcare, indoor recreational programming, and facility rentals with the following conditions. A, that in the interest of public health and safety, staff amend facility use agreements and indoor use waiver forms to include COVID-19 language regarding provincial and federal guidelines. B, that WorkSafe BC employee safety plans for city staff engaged in the provision of this service have been prepared under public health aligned industry guidelines and WorkSafe BC regulations. C, that a COVID-19 safety plan is completed and readily available to participants and has been prepared under public health aligned industry guidelines, including orders issued by the public health officer, the Minister of Public Safety and Solicitor General, and WorkSafe BC regulations. D, that reopening of the recreation facilities for the purpose of indoor recreational facility use and facility rentals comply with existing applicable city policies or bylaws. E, that city staff will review operations on a regular basis to ensure the reopening of the recreation facilities, recreational program offerings, facility rentals, and supporting facility operations are in compliance with the City of Courtenay COVID-19 indoor recreation facility use plan policy. and that the City of Courtenay COVID-19 Indoor Recreation Facility Use Plan Policy during COVID-19 pandemic be effective immediately and may be subject to change. A, as directed under the authority of the provincial or federal governments through the Emergency Program Act or Emergencies Act Canada. B, until such time as the provincial state of emergency for the COVID-19 pandemic has been rescinded and local governments may resume regular operations. Or C, by resolution of council.
Second.
All right, thank you, Councilor McCollum, for seconding that. That has generated a couple more questions. So, Councilor Frisch.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. So going back to the discussion around facility rentals and squash, and it kind of ties into the report's discussion on liability around the transmission of COVID. So I just want to clarify this. If an operational decision is made and it's following the provincial guidelines, then the city's still liable. Is that correct for some transmission?
I would say it really depends on how we word that question. Liable for what? And it's really a question for our lawyers more than someone with my expertise. However, we did seek a lot of this advice early on. We have worked very closely with our insurer to ensure that we have an understanding of best practice and ensuring that we're following those best practices along the way. What MIABC was quite clear about, and it was their lawyers that were responding to these in these webinars, is that as long as we're following the provincial guidelines, we're within the ministerial orders, and we're ensuring that we're passing on that liability to the renter as well through our license of occupation for the rental itself, that we're in the clear. There is an owner responsibility in that, and that was a relatively new component that came out in the last few weeks. But we got our COVID section of our rental agreement from MIABC, and they will amend that as needed if the ministerial orders or clarification comes.
Okay. And so on top of that, or as well, it sounds like there's a fair bit of protection when you're following council's policies.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so I guess my question is then, if we wanted to mirror another municipality's practices around something like squash, would we be fairly secure in our position if we do those actions you said, like making sure that the association has some responsibility?
Yeah, the squash is difficult because there's two main components to squash. They are both a user group that function as an association, and then there's drop-in. And so association squash, that is squash league, we can work with the league as a nonprofit on their them signing off on their safety plan. But from a drop-in perspective, it's our program. And so we need to ensure that we are comfortable with the way that the sport is being executed. And so it's both scenarios with squash. And that's another component that makes it just a little bit more, it deserves a little more rigor in putting it together.
Okay, well, thank you for that, I appreciate it.
Excellent. Councillor Theos.
Appreciate it, Mayor, and appreciate the report, Dave. My question, first of all, actually, I'm looking forward to the next topic in regards to the Wellness Center, because of the fact that I've received many questions as in terms of when that's going to open, and there's a lot of eager people out there ready to return to the fitness center at the CRA. But my question is in regards to the financial impact. And when I was looking at the report, it seemed like the revenue side compared to the expense side was almost going to be a break even during this time. And I'm wondering if you can elaborate on the financial impacts and how it is so that it may kind of balance itself off over the last few months of what we've seen through COVID. Thank you, Dave.
That's an excellent. So it doesn't break even. I apologize if it seemed to paint that way. What I did, the way I decided to present it was every year, on a good year, on a normal year, and I should ask, is my audio okay?
Yeah, you sound good.
On a normal year, there's about a $3 million subsidy to recreation. It's under 3 million because that also includes our cultural component and it includes park planning as well. But it generally, my department is subsidized by about $3 million per year on a normal year. What we've done is we separated this out so that right now, if we continue on, we've found savings in our budgets between now and the end of the year between the start of COVID and the end of the year, to say that there are some savings because we have instructors that are not working. We have casual staff that were laid off. All the wellness attendants and people like that were all laid off as well. And then there's a lot of materials and supplies that we don't need this year. So we found savings as well to move forward through the year. Having said that, the separate part of that is programming. Our programming, the way that our programming is set up is it's always intended to break even. So if we don't run programming or we do run programming, we generally come out the same because our programming is intended to break even. We always intend to have full classes, but some classes struggle more. Some classes are full with a wait list. This year in particular, we're going to ensure that everything breaks even on the programming side. So that is, if a program is not subscribed to its minimum a few days before it runs, it'll be canceled so that it can't create a burden to the taxpayer. That's something that we always have done, but some programs, you would allow them to struggle for a year or two to build up a relationship with the instructor, build up a subscribership and move forward, but we're not going to do that this year. We're not going to start anything new that's going to struggle, and anything that is kind of on its way out will not run this year because there's no room for a struggling program because it does burden the taxpayer some. So it's our programming that would break even. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does, Dave. So there will be substantial losses in other areas, but in the programming is where that element that I was looking at through the expenditures and the costs were breaking even. Okay. All right, so that does make sense to me because I was in the belief that, especially through the wellness center, there was going to be substantial losses through this last 6-7 months of COVID.
Yeah, and we can discuss that more in the next presentation. I would clarify that, of course, we don't like to hear the word losses. In that the $3 million is essentially the cost what it costs the taxpayer to run the Lewis Center, the Link, the Philberg Center, Native Sons Hall, and all of the Lawn Bowling Club, the Valley View Clubhouse, all these facilities have a core community center cost. If we run community centers, they cost about this much to run. And then there's programming that pays for itself.
Thanks, Dave.
Excellent. And Councillor Frisch.
Yeah, thanks. A little slow on the draw. Well, thanks, Mayor. And I actually, in hearing you talk about how you're sort of running the expense and revenue side of things, I just wanted to really say thanks for doing that. It shows quite a bit of business acumen, and I appreciate how hard it is to balance out our continued desire to provide an outlet for people's, desire to recreate, especially indoors, and our need to watch the bottom line. So I really appreciate that. Has there been any contemplation at a staff level of increasing the amount of outdoor programming that's available, seeing as that might just be a safer way to go during this, the pandemic?
Yeah, good question as well. We did increase our outdoor offerings substantially this summer. I guess we're just simply looking at the weather change, and we can brainstorm some offerings that would be a little more rain friendly. My only concern with that is meeting minimums. We might not meet the minimum subscribership. We have also talked about connections with the ski hill, whether there's anything to pursue there, and any external connections that we might benefit from. So there's been some talk about that, but that's something we can pursue further as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, as an old friend of mine once said, that anyone who really lives on the West Coast doesn't bother with an umbrella, and instead opts for rain gear. So yeah, if we can look at programming, especially for young people who tend to be more willing to maybe adapt to the weather, I think that would be really worthwhile. So thank you.
Absolutely. Some say there's no inappropriate weather, only inappropriate clothing.
That's true.
Excellent. Well, I do want to thank staff. I don't see any further questions here. I think we had a pretty fulsome discussion and crossed actually into our next item as well a little bit. But I think, one of the questions I've been asked a lot is, when are we going to open up? When are we going to get back to sort of normal? For some people, that's something that they are really focused on. And so I really appreciate this detailed report, really specifically making sure that even decisions that we're making today are still going to be impacted by WorkSafe BC, any provincial ministerial orders, et cetera. So we are a little bit at the mercy of really what WorkSafe BC wants us to do, and really at the end of the day, keeping people as safe as possible. So I really want to thank you for that. With that said, I'll poll council for the motion that Councillor Hillian, I believe, put forward, starting with Councillor Cole-Hamilton.
In favor.
Councillor Frisch.
In favor.
Councillor Hillian.
In favor.
Councillor McCullum.
In favor.
Councillor Morin.
In favor.
Councillor Theos.
I'm in favor.
And I'm in favor as well, so that's unanimous. Thanks, everybody. And next we have the recovery plan policy for the Wellness Center. And it says end video presentation, so I don't know if that means we get to watch a movie, but it sounds exciting. So I'll pass it over to staff, and then maybe when we get to the appropriate time, we can make the motion same as we did on the last night. That worked well.
Great. Thank you, Mayor. I'll in turn pass this over to Dave Snyder, but while I do that, as you can see, the sun has come around my office, and I'm looking rather divine, so I will fix that while Dave talks.
Thank you to the CAO, to Mayor and Council. I won't repeat as much stuff as I said in the last report, but I'll give you some details on the Wellness Center opening. This is our workout area. Some equipment has been removed from the Wellness Center to create more space. The capacity of the room, the Wellness Center proper itself, is 16 people in the COVID world. What we've done is created 1.5 hour slots that people will pre-book online, or they can phone in and book a slot. There are 7 slots per weekday and 3 slots per weekend day in this scenario. People would access the Wellness Center through the Wellness Center door, which is the one at the north end of the parking lot. That would give them access to the Wellness Center and a washroom, but no shower access. My fun phrase is "come ready, leave sweaty." And I expect that people will understand that. Participants will wipe down the equipment after using, which they always have done, but this will be a little bit more deliberate. And then an attendant will be on site as well to also wipe down the equipment as needed as well, and ensure that there's compliance with what we're expecting. A reception staff member has been moved over beside the Wellness Center. So in the video, you'll see the new reception desk that was created. This is an existing receptionist, so it's not a new position, but a receptionist has been reposted over to that side, both to provide monitoring as well as customer service on that side of the building. Depending on the programming that we have running, we may segment off that side of the building so that wellness participants only have access to that side and they leave again. But it depends on, again, say if squash was running, squash players may come in from that side as well. So that may change some of that. So if you'll allow me, I'll share my screen, and hopefully audio and video works. So let's give this a try.
Hi, I'm JC with Courtenay Recreation, and I'm pleased to let you know that the Wellness Center at the Lewis Center is opening soon. We've made some changes and are now operating by reservation only, so please be sure to book your session ahead of time. You can do this by calling 250-338-5371 or online at courtenay.ca/rec-online. Here's what you can expect next time you come in to work out.
It worked great.
Any chance of getting better music next time?
Well, it's probably got to be that free license stuff. Yeah, it's kind of had a nice video game kind of twang to it. Are you finished, or do you have some more to go with Mr. Senator?
Just a little bit more, thanks.
Yeah.
So as you saw, every participant will grab a tote, and that will give them both the ability to have cleaning supplies as well as a place to put their wallet and their cell phone and things like that. So lockers aren't being used, and we'll keep everything right with someone. Safety plan has been developed. There are $61,000 worth of memberships that we have taken in 2020. Those are suspended right now. So if you took out a membership, sadly enough, our memberships were taken just before closure. And so some people may have used a membership for about 2 or 3 weeks. So they are suspended at the time we closed. If they come in to renew, to activate their membership, it will be unsuspended at that time, and they would have 1 year less 3 weeks, or whatever the case may be, prorated use. And I have shown in the financial implications section scenarios where some people may say, well, I used to have more equipment to access, or I used to have more time slots or more freedom. They may choose to get a refund on their wellness center membership. What we've said so far is that would be available to people while the state of emergency is still in effect. So then we have a few last items, again, participant will be asked health questions like I identified in the last presentation. Staff will have registration information both on iPads as well as at the reception center that you saw, and we'll have contact tracing. And then if enrollment is low, our intent has been to recommend a potential reclosure if needed. So I'll take any questions.
Excellent. And that has generated some questions. Councillor Frisch.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor, and thanks again, Mr. Snyder. So the time slots, are they staggered, or can like people show up in pairs, or how's that work?
Excellent question. Yeah, they're synced up, so they will be at the same time, but knowing that there's only 16 of them, it's not a big crowd coming at one time. The intent is that the door would be locked and then unlocked in time for people to come in. Once we've received everyone, we lock the door again. And so, yeah, there would be some lining up, but again, 16 people is not that many, so we think it'll be okay. And we'll also have the adjacent activity room available for stretching. So some people that come slightly early could go in and stretch as needed before going into the wellness center.
So is the idea that if there is some sort of transmission, that it's, I mean, you would have been with the same 16 people at one point, but the next day you might be with a different 15 people?
Yeah, and since they're all booked slots, we'll have all that information, so it'll be really easy to contact them. In fact, our new software allows us to email participants as well directly from the software.
Yeah, I guess it depends how regularly people work out, but like I pointed out, if someone comes 3 or 4 times a week, they're going to be in contact with different people potentially every single time, and which makes me wonder about. And so I get your idea, but I wonder if it just might make more sense to stagger the arrival and departure times, or did you guys kind of think that through and think it would be just too much contact?
And I'll let Kathy respond to some of this as well. But one thing I would say is if we staggered the times, then there's potentially twice as many people that person may have come in contact with as well. But I'll let Mrs. Collins comment on that as well.
Thanks, Dave. So through the CAO to Mayor and Council, so further to what Dave was saying, instead of staggering the times, we've allowed about a half hour in between each time slot. So not only does that avoid people from the time slots kind of crossing one another, but it allows for a bit more of a deep cleaning and kind of getting those caddies all wiped out and disinfected before the next time slot comes in. So there is not staggering necessarily, but a gap in between those time slots.
And as for the use of the showers, was there an option to allow people to use the showers, and how much use do they get anyways, I suppose?
Yeah, the challenge with the showers, it's unfortunate I don't have a picture of the showers here, but there are gang showers. And so providing proper distancing in a communal shower, especially in the men's, is the only one that I've seen, frankly, sorry. But it's about 5 or 6 shower heads in one room. And so to separate that out is quite difficult. And if we had individual stalls, it would be a lot easier. I believe, and Kathy or Carol could comment on this, but I believe we only have one individual stall within the bathroom. 3, there you go, 3 individual stalls. So this is the sort of thing that I said earlier in the last report. This is one of those things that will likely evolve. If we find that there's a demand and we can adapt the safety plan to incorporate the shower, then we would move forward with that. As well, other municipalities that have gone before us have worked some of the bugs out of this. And we are in regular contact with the rest of the rec professionals across the province on a regular basis. It's about every week and a half or 2 weeks. I'm in a meeting. Kathy's in meetings with her staff or her colleagues as well. And so we're hearing about advancements that are taking place in other municipalities as well.
Well, I really appreciate your willingness to keep on working on it as it progresses.
All right, Councillor Theos.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, going to the video in terms of the comments in regards to the video was really good. I appreciate the touchless dispensers, whether it's the sanitizer or the water. I know the water was there in the past, but noticing the sanitizer being touchless, I have a feeling moving forward, most of our facilities will start incorporating those type of dispensers, similar to the library board. We're starting to look at putting and including those, and there, of course, there's a upfront cost to that, but I think that might be the direction of the future. And the video featured some extremely talented trainers, including my personal trainer, Nancy Victoria. So I was very happy to see that. We're in good hands. One of my questions, going from the private, where I have membership at a private facility, the private facility opened months ago now, and a very similar concept initially, where they were to have no more than 15, and then I think it went up to 20. And similar ideas about sanitizing. They had actually a station for washing their hands, and also in regards to initiating their fitness session. But again, the kit with the spray bottle and sanitary paper towel. The question that I have in regards to there's two questions. The one would be in regards to group fitness. Are there any plans for having group fitness, bike classes, and any of the other group fitness classes that were being offered as of yet? And the second one is in regards to this initial phasing. I appreciate that there's a plan, Dave, and we're looking at 16 initially, but do we have a plan of saying, okay, well, after the first 3 weeks, then we're gonna revisit that and possibly open it up and get a little bit more flexibility in that. If you can comment on those two areas, please, Dave.
Thanks so much. Yeah, I'll address the second one first. We do have plans to explore possibilities of expanding the wellness center into the adjacent room, and I'll let Kathy comment on that as well. She'll have more detail on that. We also have traditionally run spin classes in the activity room as well, and so we have that room available for those classes as well. In terms of group fitness, again, this is something that Kathy can comment on too. So I'll pass over to Kathy Collins on that.
Thanks, Dave. So through the CAO to the Mayor and Council. So to address the second question you had with regards to the ability to modify or adjust our numbers and times. So it's a similar principle we would work with our indoor programming, where we would be constantly adjusting and modifying based on demand, based on what the orders are, based on the guidelines and recommendations that are out there. As with anything, we're starting small. We're starting with kind of the bare bones, like worst case scenario with 16. If there's a demand, if things go well, we do have the ability to increase those numbers and or modify the time slots, which means potentially reducing or increasing them. So we're ready to adjust as needed. And in terms of the group fitness, so that has been part of kind of that indoor programming, which was mentioned in the previous staff report. So those have been incorporated into that. So again, working with room capacities, which basically we're looking about 16 maximum for our group fitness classes. And instead of them operating in the activity room where they normally have run, because we've moved in kind of a stretching, low impact equipment into that room, they'll be now located in the MP hall. So we've kind of had to move everything around in order to allow for maximum usage of space, and as well as allowing us to have as many people as we could possibly have safely within any indoor space.
Thank you for that.
All right, next we have Councillor Morin.
Right, I think my question from way back has mostly been answered. You're utilizing other spaces when you can for other equipment. And I guess there's not really any, would probably be too cumbersome to try to locate anything in more of an outside area during the better weather. Guess there's no way to do something like that. I mean, I know there's fitness classes can maybe take part outside or whatever, but probably equipment, it doesn't really make sense.
Yeah, it's an excellent question. We do have a concrete deck, as you watched in the video, where people are lining up and coming into the outside of the building. There's a concrete deck there, has a railing around it. That was created with outdoor exercise in mind, or outdoor ping pong is another thing that we've done in other municipalities, or just tables and umbrellas. And so there is the possibility of bringing equipment outside. The challenge is it just further reduces our capacity because that's staff to wheel things out. It's free use, which is great. We'd be happy to facilitate free use where possible, but there's potential wear and tear on the equipment that we'd have to just weigh the impact.
Right. And my other question was about capacity. So you have 16. What's the usual capacity?
Oh, it's an excellent question. Pre-COVID, we didn't really measure that as much. I guess I could ask Kathy to guess, but maybe 3 times that. Kathy, any thoughts? Or Carol?
Through council to mayor and council, it would be, it would really depend on the popularity of the class. Sometimes you'd have anywhere from a maximum of 22 to upwards of 30. It really depends on what our capacity is within those, the room that it's being taken place in.
Well, you probably have a guideline for capacity for the room. So do you have any idea what that would be like in terms of fire restriction, or?
We'd be well below that right now. Is that what you're referring to? Or
I was just curious what percentage of the capacity we're utilizing with the adapted plan. Like if you get a meeting room, that you're allowed, your occupancy is 50 people or whatever. So I just thought that you probably have the same thing for the wellness center, but that's okay if you don't have it at the top of your head, no problem.
Yeah, sorry, I don't think that's something that we have factored in, but it is an interesting way to look at it for sure.
Okay, thanks for that. And Councillor McCollum.
Thanks, Mayor. And yeah, thanks for this other report concerning facility opening. I think it looks great and it seems well thought out. And I think there's probably a lot of community members that are looking forward to getting back to the gym. I don't imagine that low bookings of limitation of 16 is going to be much of a problem. I imagine a lot of those slots, especially in the morning and afternoon, are probably going to be booked up. Just a couple quick comments. One is I'm thinking about the fact that the slots are 90 minutes long and are meant to start at a certain time. And I imagine some gym users will probably be looking at booking the 90 minutes, but maybe not arriving at the said time and perhaps shortening their time down to 60. And I'm just wondering if the one receptionist or reception person would be able to juggle different arrival times, or if that's just going to be communicated with their booking that they need to kind of show up in a certain window.
Yeah, it's an excellent question, and we have discussed this, but I can muddle my way through that, but I'm going to ask Kathy to respond to that because she'll be more eloquent with it.
Through the CAO to mayor and council. So yes, you're correct. What we're going to recommend is that everyone needs to arrive within 10 minutes of their booked time slot. It just reduces any kind of crossing of traffic or anybody else. If they don't arrive within that 10 minutes, then they forfeited their time slot basically. And they can always call. Things happen, of course, but we would recommend everybody arrives within that 10 minutes. If they want to leave early, no problem, but they need to arrive within that time.
Okay, that makes perfect sense to me. The other comment I had is just that I think that the limited use of showers, which again I completely understand, given the setup of the facilities, especially the ones that are near to the gym. But if there is a way to start opening that up to the public, I think that not having shower use is really going to impact lunchtime users. So if that can be prioritized, I think that would be the number one gym users that are really going to feel the impact of not being able to shower after their workout or get changed when they arrive. But other than that, I think it looks great, and I'm happy to see this report.
Excellent, thanks. And Councillor Hillian.
Thank you, Mayor, and thanks to staff for the report and all the work that's involved. Staff will be aware that we have come under some criticism from some in the community who think that we've taken an overly long time to open up our facilities. And several of us responded to an email correspondent just last week on that subject. I wonder if staff could comment on just briefly on how much work has been involved and where we stand in relation to other municipalities that you're in contact with. Councillor Theos mentioned that private gyms have been open for a substantial period of time, and perhaps you could just highlight what the different issues are for us in that regard, please.
Thank you. It has been a long time for us as well. Back in March and April, the regulations were coming in fast and furious, or rather the provincial orders were coming in, but no guidelines. And so it wasn't until about a month and a half, 2 months into COVID before provincial guidelines were issued. At that time, municipalities started scrambling to figure out how to adapt these provincial guidelines to their facilities. And then we're waiting for the next stage of the BC Restart Plan to hit before gyms could open. So there's about and sorry, I don't have the number with me, about a 2.5 month period there where we were not allowed to open. After that, some municipalities have opened gym facilities, like Comox did theirs on the rink that they have, and Comox has opened theirs as well. And it depends on both risk aversion as well as the usefulness or the suitableness of the facility for opening. So those are factors that we look at. Staff have gone through a substantial process of safety analysis. It starts with a risk assessment that staff had to do. According to WorkSafe BC guidelines, we have to do the risk analysis with the frontline staff. Our frontline staff were laid off, and so we had to call them back, do the risk analysis with them, and then establish a safety plan. And so having gone through those steps, now is a matter of finding time to get to council, frankly, and trying to get on a council agenda. When we compare this to a private gym is a very different scenario. They need something that the owner is comfortable with, and they move forward. There isn't a series of hurdles that they go through the same as us. I would say that across the province, as I sit through the Recreation and Parks Association meetings, we're pretty much in the 50% range where some are still closed. I know Vancouver's opening this week as well. And so we're behind some, we're ahead of others. So we're kind of mid-pack, I would say.
Thanks very much. And can you just clarify how many staff are we bringing back from our total complement, just in terms of the employment that we're going to generate through this?
Yeah, there's the 2 reports that would be impacted by that. And this would be a difficult calculation for Kathy, I'm sure, but I would far rather her guess at that calculation than myself. And this report itself, it is wellness attendance. And so we're also, I'm just giving her time to do mental math. we are limiting the number of open hours for the wellness center itself. And that is allowing us to have a wellness attendant on staff all the time. Pre-COVID, we had spaces during the day that didn't have a wellness attendant on staff. And that always had made me a little bit nervous. And so in COVID times, we wanted to make sure that we do have an attendant on staff all the time. Kathy, any thoughts on the number of staff that are coming back to work, perhaps to this and the other report?
Through the CAO to mayor and council. So Dave, you're asking for both attendants and program instructors?
Maybe in separated categories, yes.
So for wellness center attendants, we have a complement of 7. And then program instructors, we typically vary casually to have about 100 of them.
And how many of those would be back at work as a result of this opening?
The wellness center attendants will be full complement, as Dave had noted. Program instructors, that's a hard guess. I would say because we're operating through, as Dave had stated, with our indoors, our core programs, it should be the bulk of our staffing. So I'm hoping, again, this is a guess, I'm hoping about 75 in total. So almost there.
That's great. Thanks very much.
You're welcome.
And Councillor Theos.
Thanks, Mayor. Dave, I had one more question in regards to there are a number of seniors and people with mobility issues that may be uncomfortable moving back into the fitness center immediately. Have we thought about a time slot, one time slot, but possibly for a group of seniors or people with mobility challenges, just to be on their own for the short-term period, just to reintroduce them back into the world of fitness and activity, physical activity?
Thanks for that question. I think it's a good consideration. It's something that I have heard before, and it's something that I've had specific requests not to do. So we hear both from the public, right? Some are saying, "Hey, don't set aside specific times, or else I lose my flexibility as well." So it's something that I would say leave with staff, and we'll see what we can accommodate.
Okay, thank you, Dave.
And Mr. Kushner, did you want to jump in? Sorry, I saw your hand up there.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to add on to Councillor Hillian's comment, which I think was an excellent one. There were 2 factors that were very important for our slow and measured opening response. And one obviously was the safety of our employees to ensure we had all the safe work plans in place. And the second was a really detailed financial analysis of the reopening plan. And that was undertaken about a week and a half to 2 weeks ago. And we thought that it was very prudent to make sure we had that information for council so that they can make a very open and transparent decision to open up the facility and understand the financial implications.
Excellent, thank you. Right, and Councillor Cole Hamilton.
Yeah, thanks very much, and thanks also, Dave, for this this very detailed report. I know that we're proceeding with advice from MAI or MIA, for one of them, and their legal counsel, and I assume that we've been incorporating that into our waivers, and waivers are useful obviously in terms of providing some measure of protection for the city, but also helping our clients understand what they're looking at and what risks they might possibly be encountering despite our best efforts. And I just want to confirm that we have had that language kind of vetted and by their legal counsel, and also I assume people have the capacity to sign digitally before arriving on the premises, so that's taken care of without any contact.
Yes, thanks. That's a great point. Both are in place. I believe, and again, staff can correct me if I say this incorrectly, when they enroll in the program, they have access to their waivers. I believe that's a digital component. So they see that in advance. If anyone's uncomfortable with it, they can choose not to enroll. And it is a digital acknowledgement at the time that they register for the program.
Great. Okay, that's fantastic for people to have the access to that and know exactly what they're encountering before coming on premises. Great. This sounds like a really, really well-developed plan. Thank you.
Excellent. I don't see any further questions, but yeah, I just really want to thank staff for going through the details, making sure that we have really all of our ducks in a row from a health perspective, a financial perspective, and again, you know, really keeping our options open as we contemplate and really brace for a potential second wave. And really just even without talking about waves, just as the information is coming in, we're learning more about this silly virus so that we can really make the best decisions. So I really want to thank you for that. Also have to thank Juan. I don't know how he can sit there and do pull-ups like he was doing, like nothing was going on, but that was good to see. And I think this is probably an appropriate time to also really thank staff that have stepped up and done posts on our Facebook page to really keep people engaged as best they can under the circumstances, because I think really exercise right now is one of those things that is helping keep people sane, and it's really tough when you can't do that on a regular basis the way that you know, we have for decades here. So really want to give kudos to staff for that. Did we put the motion on the floor? Maybe we haven't put the motion on the floor. Councillor Hillian, would you like to move the motion?
I'll certainly move the CAO recommendation in relation to the Wellness Center. And I wonder, Mr. Mayor, if it's acceptable, given that it's very similar to the previous one, if we reference it as written on page 42 of our public agenda, so that I don't have to read the entire thing out again.
I'm okay with that. We'll make a judgment call, an executive decision, you might say. I missed the seconder, but I heard it. Was that Councillor Frisch? Yeah. Excellent. So Councillor Frisch has seconded it. We'll poll council, starting with Councillor Cole-Hamilton.
In favor.
Councillor Frisch.
In favor.
Councillor Hillian.
In favor.
Councillor McCullum.
In favor.
Councillor Morin.
In favor.
Councillor Theos. Did he vanish? I think we've lost Councillor Theos. He was there just a second ago, but we'll wait for him to come back. There may be some technical difficulties, and I'll vote in favor as well, so that makes it unanimous. And again, thanks again to staff and to everyone out there for being patient while we make sure that we open up in a responsible and safe manner. So. With that being said, next we have the zoning amendment bylaw number 3012.
I can move this one, Mayor.
Thanks.
I'll move that based on the, on today's staff report, zoning amendment bylaw number 3012 to allow for secondary suite at 1520 Thorpe Avenue. Council approve option 1 and proceed to first and second readings of zoning amendment bylaw number 3012 2020, and that council considers zoning amendment bylaw 3012 2020 consistent with the city's official community plan, and that council waives the requirement to hold a public hearing with respect to the zoning amendment bylaw 3012 2020 pursuant to section 4642 of the Local Government Act, and directs staff to give notice of the waiver of the public hearing pursuant to section 467 of the Local Government Act in advance of consideration of the third reading of the bylaw.
Second. All right, that's been seconded. Excellent. Thanks for bringing that forward. I do hear crickets now. I don't know if that's a, anybody else hear crickets right now?
It is actually crickets outside of the office door.
Okay. I know some people have the cricket as their text messaging thing or whatever on their phone, but I was like, yeah, that sounds very crickety. All right, let's pass it over to staff.
Thank you, Mayor. I will pass this over to Matt Fitzgerald to summarize the report and take any questions that council may have.
Thank you. Through the CAO to Mayor and Council. So this proposal is for a secondary suite to be added to an existing house. The proposal does comply with all zoning requirements relative to suites, including off-street parking. An alternative process public meeting was held in support of the proposal. with 2 attendees and 3 letters of support provided, which were attached to the council or the staff report. Staff are recommending that first and second readings of the bylaw are given and that council waives the public hearing requirement. With that, I'll take any questions.
All right. I don't see any questions just yet. See no questions. Councillor Hillian.
Thank you, Mayor. So I'm generally in support of this application. It seems like a reasonable proposal, but I did want to make reference to the one neighbor who was apparently approached in the preliminary stages and has registered a strong objection with us. In fact, they believe that if we approve this, and I'm going to quote from their message here, that I believe they use the word destroy in here somewhere. Yes, increasing the population density will destroy the character of the neighborhood, because if one neighbor is allowed to turn their house into a multifamily residence, it opens the floodgates to any number of such dwellings. I wonder if staff could comment on both aspects of that. First of all, do they think that we might potentially see a flood of applications in this area? And what do they think of the concept that allowing one or potentially more secondary suites would actually destroy the quality of the Thorpe Road neighborhood?
Thanks for the question. In regard to the first part and the number of applications that we see, I guess in my time here, we've seen maybe half a dozen or a little more secondary suite applications, and about half of those would have been in East Courtenay. So I don't think we'll see a flood of applications. I think it's a slow trickle, and they're assessed on a case-by-case basis through the rezoning process currently. As part of that process, as we see tonight, the neighbors have the opportunity to voice any concerns that they may have. So that would be my response to the first part. To the second part regarding character, this would be adding, one or two people to the existing neighborhood. There's very few other suites in this neighborhood. The zoning bylaw does contain parameters relative to suites, like off-street, the requirement for off-street parking, which are being adhered to. So I would say that the character of the neighborhood, there'll be very little disruption, and the neighborhood can easily absorb the additional population.
Yes, thanks. I would agree with you. And I would also point out that if several residents on the street decided that they were going to invite family members to come and live with them under one roof without creating a secondary suite, theoretically, in the view of some, that would increase the density in a perfectly legal way. And then again, in the views of some, destroy the quality of the neighborhood. And woe be us if we get to a point where the idea of single family residential neighborhoods means that you can't have additional family members living with you. So thanks very much.
All right, thanks, Councillor Hillian. And I know when I have talked to people that have that argument and say that they wouldn't do it, add a suite to their own home. When I've asked, what they think their neighbors would do, a lot of them say they don't think their neighbors would do it either. So I think that in of itself also limits the speed that suites will be going in. So even if there was a blanket suite motion that was put forward. So I think, it certainly is something that I don't think people have to be too fearful of. Councillor Morin.
Great, thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I'm in support of this, and I think it sounds like a very low impact, rezoning. I mean, it states that you wouldn't even be able to tell that the suite is there from the outside. They're utilizing a lot of the existing space, and there's many homes right now that have lots of space, and probably would love to you know, not be rolling around in their house by themselves. In fact, many of the seniors, as I've mentioned, that I've talked to, if they had a safe situation with another family member or something. Even I've seen older folks, particularly women, who have moved in together, etc. And one might have a separate suite. So I just think, you know, it's in a great location, even if there isn't a family member down the road, close to the college and the hospital, etc. I think these are the kinds of things we need to be promoting, and I agree with Councillor Hillian that someone could, you know, have 5 or 6 teenagers living in the house, and you know, 3 or 4 vehicles, and you know, that would be legal. So I think we do need to keep things in perspective and support these kinds of initiatives. I'd like to see more of a, rather than having the case by case, I hope that we do move to more of an easier procedure, although we're not being overrun with these applications. But it just seems like a simple rezoning, in my opinion. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Moran. Councillor Cole-Hamilton.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I just wanted to speak very briefly in favor of this. It seems to be generally supported by the neighbors, and there's adequate off-street parking, and it is literally a granny flat. I believe their grandmother was going to move down from Black Creek when she was at an appropriate juncture, and I think you know, in recent months we've learned that older folks and seniors are probably safer when looked after by family members than in other places they could be, and yeah, I think they also referenced school-age children who I'm sure would be thrilled to have their grandmother live downstairs. So this is not the sort of thing that I believe destroys neighborhoods. I think it makes them stronger. So happily in support of this.
All right. With that, I don't see any of the other further questions or comments. So I'll poll council, starting with Councillor Cole-Hamilton.
In favor?
Councillor Frisch.
In favor.
Councillor Hillian.
In favor.
Councillor McCullum.
In favor.
Councillor Moran.
In favor.
Councillor Theos.
I'll be in favor.
And I'm in favor as well. Thanks very much. And next we have zoning amendment 2989.
Mayor, I'm happy to move this if you'd like.
Sure.
I'll move that based on today's staff report entitled Zoning Amendment Bylaw number 2989 to allow for a subdivision of 4070 Fraser Road. Council approve option 1 and complete the following steps. Council give first and second reading of zoning amendment bylaw number 2989/2020 to rezone the subject property to CD 21 and PA 2. That council considers zoning amendment bylaw number 2989/2020 consistent to the city's official community plan. That council waives the requirement to hold a public hearing. That final reading of the bylaw be withheld pending the completion of the park land disposal process, and that final reading of the bylaw be withheld pending the registration of a section 219 covenant on the subject property.
If someone can second.
I'll second.
Thank you, Councillor Hillian. And we'll pass it over to staff.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll again pass this over to Matt Fitzgerald to summarize the report and take any questions that council may have.
Thank you, through CAO to Mayor and Council. So this proposal is a proposal to rezone a parcel to facilitate a subsequent subdivision, which would involve 12 strata lots, which would be accessed from Harborview Boulevard. The parcel is currently within the CVRD's Rural 8 zone, and proposed to be rezoned to Comprehensive Development 21 zone, as well as the Public Assembly 2 zone. Just for background there, the Comprehensive Development 21 zone is the zone that the rest of the Buckstone or the Ridge neighborhood falls under. Second part of this bylaw will be to enable smaller lot frontages and front yards and rear yards setbacks than are permitted elsewhere in the Ridge neighborhood. And the intent of this is to avoid subsequent variances that we've seen with other phases of the Ridge development. To access this proposal, a portion of city parkland will be needed to facilitate the connection to Harborview Boulevard. council give this bylaw first and second reading tonight, then a subsequent park closure process will be initiated and required prior to the bylaws being given final adoption. A public meeting was held in support of this proposal, with attendees generally supportive of what was being proposed. Staff are recommending that first and second readings are given, and given that much of the surrounding area remains undeveloped, staff are also recommending that the public hearing requirement is waived. I'll take any questions.
All right, and we have Councillor Cole Hamilton.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you for the report. I just had a couple of questions. One is the buffers around the land. One is to riparian buffer, which I think I understand well. The other one is with ALR land. And I was wondering if you could tell me, I believe there's going to be a covenant to ensure that buffer, what exactly that would constitute.
Thanks for the question. Through the CAO to Mayor and Council. So on the south edge of the property, the requirement would be for a 15-meter covenanted area. This area would be fenced and vegetated. And the intent there is that that would provide separation between the development or the proposed lots and the existing agricultural land south of the property.
Okay, and would that entail that any trees that are there would remain standing as part of that buffer?
Yeah, I don't think it specifically requires that, at least in terms of the ALC's response, but I think that's something we'd be looking for as part of the subsequent tree cutting permit. That's an ideal area for retaining any remaining trees.
Okay, and I just have a couple of other points. One was the sustainability survey, and I want to thank you for including those now on developments. That's been a really helpful addition, so I appreciate the responsiveness on that. It indicated connections to nearby commercial areas, and I was trying to figure out what that might be referring to.
Through CAO to Mayor and Council, I think they would be looking more regionally and looking at like the Cliff Avenue a regional strip.
Okay. Okay, and I guess one final comment I wanted to make is I know that the public hearings have been a difficult thing for us to do with COVID, and I note that that we're still obviously meeting virtually, and I'm hoping that we'll be able to return to public hearings. It's part of the process that we usually conduct, and with this, because it's not just a secondary suite, it's a subdivision, albeit a small one, but it is still a subdivision. I would tend to favor a public hearing and not waiving that. Perhaps it will encourage us to develop a process for doing that, either in person or virtually. But as a consequence, I think just on that one point, I'll be supporting option 2, because I would like to see something of the scale of a small subdivision having the opportunity for a public hearing. All right, thank you.
All right, and Councillor McCullum.
Thanks, Mayor. Yeah, I have a few questions just about the site of this development in general. Just the ridge development is kind of unique in that it sits away from most of city services, and while the newer streets in that subdivision are up to current standards, the roads to access it certainly are not. It's been a while since I've traveled down Fraser Road, but to my recollection, there's no shoulder or street lighting. Am I correct in that?
Yeah, through CEO to Mayor and Council, yeah, there's currently no shoulder or street lighting on Fraser. I was just there the other day, so I saw that.
And I'm just like, to follow up on that, like, we're looking at adding, some more housing out there, and the report says that this is in fact in line with our OCP. Do we have like a long-term vision for how many homes we're going to put on, to access off Fraser Road with no proper facilities for walking, cycling, or even just regular street safety in terms of lighting? And are we collecting any type of DCCs for those improvements, or is that going to be something that the city will just have to add to the general tax levies at some point?
Yeah, thanks for the question. I guess regarding the first part, the Ridge development, or the South Courtenay local area plan area is nearing build out. I think all the phases have been or near approval, and then the houses will be built out in subsequent years. So the build out of the neighborhood is at least as it's currently envisioned, is nearing an end. With regard to improvements to Fraser, I'm not sure if that's a DCC project. I don't know if there's other staff that can answer that one.
Yeah, sorry, I can jump in there. To the best of my knowledge, it's not a DCC project. That area came into the city after the adoption of the last DCC bylaw. And just adding to the comments of Mr. Fitzgerald, the local area plan for that area designates, the Buckstone development and some of the surrounding areas as what's referred to as master planned residential. The densities that are proposed for that are really your typical single family, low density. The plan was developed in 2009, shortly after annexation at that time. As Mr. Fitzgerald indicated, we're getting close to build out of that area. There are some remaining lands that would still be in that designation, and I think through the upcoming OCP development, we'll re-examine that and bring forward options to council for consideration.
Great, thanks for that answer, both of you. Yeah, I suppose my concern around this is that it is a wide open area that's sitting on its own, and what we have is a subdivision application that's definitely consistent with what's already in and around there, but whether or not that really matches how we want to see Courtenay develop or the facilities in and around the subdivision, I'm not totally convinced that it's ideal. And we've kind of missed the boat, I suppose, on getting DCCs to make the necessary road improvements that would service that area. If we're going to go ahead with a subdivision, that's something that the rest of the community is going to be responsible for, and I don't think that that's really anything that we can fix at this time. So, but I just wanted to make sure that I understood that correctly. And then the other concern that jumped out for me was around this 15-meter agricultural buffer, and that staff had actually suggested that that buffer be dedicated as a park access and some walking or trail connectivity, which to me makes great sense. It's a bit of a trade-off for the person that's seeking this subdivision, that they would add to the facilities that are servicing this neighborhood, especially with the lack of sidewalks outside of it. We heard through public consultation when we did our Parks and Rec plan that trail service or trail connectivity and access is a #1 priority. So I would like to see that kind of improved with a subdivision, not just the bare minimum met. And my last comment is just that I would echo what Councillor Cole-Hamilton suggested, that doing a new subdivision and changing zoning in this way, I think would be well suited for a public hearing. And I'm curious to know what kind of additional timelines we would be adding to this process by requiring it, and if we're any closer to having a sense of when we would be able to facilitate a public hearing before we proceed with that option.
I guess I'll jump in there. And so if the preference is to see modifications to the plan, like you mentioned, I would recommend the council defers consideration of this bylaw tonight and requests additional information. And in that time, we can clarify with the applicant what's required, as well as have the plan updated to reflect that. With regards to public hearings, my understanding is in October, we'll be prepared to start public hearings again. So for an application time such as this one, that should work very well and have minimal delay on the overall process.
Oh, that's great to hear. Yeah, I would be really comfortable moving to that process if it's in the not too distant future that we could potentially proceed with that.
Mr. Mayor, maybe take a chance for me to jump in. Staff is contemplating bringing a report to council in regards to council meetings and public hearings for September the 21st. A lot of excellent work has gone on to into this potential, and council will see that on the 21st.
That's great. Thank you very much.
Excellent. And Councillor Frisch.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor, and thanks to staff for the report. I also have concerns about the impact of pretty much any subdivision on the outskirts of town and how it affects our transportation network. Going back to our master transportation plan, I recall that there was some contemplation of upgrading Comox Logging Road, seeing as we annexed that along with all these lands into the city at a cost of around $10 million. And I also recall that perhaps didn't make it into the plan, and maybe staff can clarify that. So the question is always is, at what point in time would we expect to see DCCs recovered for these projects, and what pieces are missing from our master plans that allow us to collect DCCs for that? And I'm thinking specifically of that Comox Logging Road, and also of the Rails with Trail corridor, which is actually the best active transportation route for those living in the ridge to access services in Courtenay. I know that's a few questions all wrapped up in one. Sorry.
Mr. Kushner, I saw you put your hand up. Did you want to tackle some of those questions?
Sure, thank you. Yes, Councillor Frisch, those are excellent comments and questions, and those projects are identified in the draft transportation master plan. They are significant costs. I think the number of $10 million that you identified is some years ago and needs to be updated. The issue, of course, is just the sheer magnitude of both those corridors, the Comox Valley Logging Road, which of course also has a crossing of the Millard Creek, and then of course Fraser Road from the Old Island Highway up to the Comox Valley Logging Road, and of course the four-way intersection. So there is some initial design contemplation, and we'll be updating those cost projections this year. Unfortunately, COVID has conspired against us in terms of our DCC bylaw update. We do plan on bringing that forward at some point. Of course, a lot of work is going into that. We're just finalizing the asset management plans and the 7 asset classes, which of course are instrumental in getting us to the DCC projects, but they most certainly are in that list.
Well, that's good to hear, and I'm sorry to get off on a tangent here. What about the corridor along the railroad and its potential expansion? Is that adequately reflected in either the recreation master plan or the transportation master plan, so that it might be included in the cost for DCCs as well?
Yeah, it's another great point. I will say a bit of good news is the Public Works has completed that lower section of the Buckstone Trail to the Island Highway, so that project is done. But the actual corridor, the potential corridor, isn't in our work plan now. It is something that would have to be put in. I know that Mr. Snyder can certainly jump in and speak to this, but it is identified in the Parks and Rec master plan. But it's certainly something that we'll be reviewing and looking at potentially adding to the transportation master plan as well.
Would that, sorry if I'm cutting off Mr. Snyder, but would that recreation plan qualify for being included in the in DCCs collected?
Yeah, maybe I'll pass this over to Ian. He can talk a little bit about that and the legality of the DCCs.
Yeah, in my initial view, yes, we could include that as a transportation option. Same way we could include roads, sidewalks, cycling networks. The question would be doing the analysis of cost estimates for that to an adequate standard to include in the DCC bylaw, along with the other projects. And as Mr. Kushner said, just waiting on some finalization of asset plans prior to bringing back amendments to the bylaw, which may or may not include the trails and streets in that area. I think it's something we want to contemplate, both the city as a whole and with regional connections on prioritizing projects. But a lot of work yet to do on the DCC bylaw.
And I guess we'll be seeing those that asset plan come to council at some point this year or next year, or at least a review of it or an update. Is that possible?
Yeah, I would say early next year is probably when we're going to see the draft plans, and staff are working behind the scenes on those now.
Okay, thanks. And we're staff going to comment on the timeline for this application if we do defer it a little longer? How long has this been in the pipeline for this subdivision?
Yeah, I can comment on that one through the CAO to Mayor and Council. So this application has been around for a while. It's been about a year since the application was made. A lot of back and forth with the applicant, and I think one of the reasons was that the owner wanted to fully comprehend what costs and what would be expected of them as part of the development process. So as we nailed down some of these variables, and there still seem to be some variables to work out, that's added a bit of time. But in terms of going forward, I think I had commented on that earlier with public hearings resuming in the near future. This application should flow nicely into the public hearing process if that's the option council wants, and I guess that would be the timeline going forward.
Okay, well, and I understand that some of council's desire to have a public hearing, so I wouldn't be opposed to supporting a different motion. And I also like to point out that I think we're probably doing the best we can do, considering this land was annexed back in, I think it was 2012. And, we have our limitations on what we can do based on our current DCC bylaws. So yeah, I hope we can do better in the future. And yeah, thanks.
All right, thanks. And we have Councillor Moore.
Right, thank you, Mayor. I'm in agreement that I think a public hearing is necessary. Certainly the Ridge and the annexation was not without controversy when it occurred, and I think there's still residue of that in the surrounding area in terms of folks who are living a more kind of rural lifestyle. I did take a ride on my bike up there this weekend, and yeah, the Fraser is narrow. It's definitely not the best for pedestrians or cyclists, or although it is, and I know actually some people in that area who have complained about that. So I think that we do need to listen to some of the surrounding folks and see if there's see what their concerns might be. I'm also wondering, in terms of Millard Creek, that property, as I say, I was right there, and it is, completely bordering. And I know that they've proposed that riparian buffer, but it does seem like a really sensitive area, and I don't know. I didn't see much mention of kind of consultation around that. Around that aspect, and I know they did say that, or in the proposal it talks about doing that in future, but I'm wondering if staff can comment at all on the kind of environmental piece and the Millard Creek, the impact, etc. And also tree retention, because again, another thing I remember from the Ridge is that there had been folks who really wanted more green space there, and it's a beautiful view up there for sure, but there's not a lot of green up there, and to take more out of the surrounding area, I think, yeah, I can see people's concerns about that. So if you're able to comment on those aspects, that would be great. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks for the question through CAO to Mayor and Council. So with regard to the creek's presence on the property, so a preliminary environmental assessment was conducted, and the purpose at zoning of that study is to ensure that development can occur on the property, and then the details would later be finalized as part of a development permit process, which would be required prior to subdivision. So we can be assured that the proposed lots aren't within an environmental setback. In fact, the applicant has proposed a setback greater than the biologist recommended, and proceed with the zoning, knowing that the finer details will be sorted out as part of the development permit process. With regard to the second question, tree retention, I think we'd be looking to retain almost all the trees on site. Almost all of them fall within that 30-meter buffer that I mentioned before. So the buffer around the creek be protected also through the development permit process. And the remaining trees are on the periphery of the site, so they're ideal candidates to be retained as they don't affect the building sites of the lots. So that would be my perspectives on tree retention.
Okay, thank you.
Excellent. Thanks very much. Councillor Frisch.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I also wanted to show some support for the landowner and whoever he's working with to design a lot. Some of the points that Matt Fitzgerald just outlined, I think, are commendable, especially how they have designed those lots so that a lot of the trees are set in the back and can hopefully be retained, and especially the extended riparian zone. Was there discussion with the Piercy-Millard Creek Watershed Group?
Yeah, thanks for the question. So as part of this process, the Conservation Partnership was referred the application. I don't have a copy of the comments in front of me, unfortunately, but I can assure Council that as part of the subsequent development permit process, so the environmental development permit process, they would again be referred for more detailed comments, and that's really our opportunity to ensure that their expertise is integrated into the permit requirements.
Yeah, well, that's great, and it does look like the landowner has considered that with that extended riparian zone. So I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Excellent. And Councillor McCollum.
Thanks again, Mayor. Yeah, I just wanted to clarify that 30-meter extended riparian zone doesn't fall within any of the proposed lot configuration, that it is all part of the proposed park. Is that correct, or is there a little bit of overlap on some of it?
As proposed, the 30-meter buffer is partially within the lot of the existing house. However, the zoning that we're proposing would encompass that entire 30-meter area. So for the new lots, no, they wouldn't encompass any of that 30-meter buffer, but for the existing lot or the existing house site, that would include part of the 30-meter area. But again, notwithstanding that, it would be protected through the zoning placed on that buffer.
Okay, that's great. Thanks for the clarity. I just also wanted to loop back to the 15-meter buffer at the back of the other proposed lots. Because while I understand that during the development process, there will be a limitation on, disturbing that area or tree cutting. But my concern is that, 10 years out from now, those new homeowners will have control of their land, and that does fall on their lot. and there's going to be a temptation to remove trees on the side of their backyard that's being shaded in the afternoon. So yeah, so basically for long-term protection in that area, I just think it would be much more beneficial for the community to see that moved into part of our trail system rather than having it on private lands if the buffer prevents them from developing it or doing anything with that strip anyway. I think the community would be better served having it divvied up a little bit differently.
All right, excellent, thanks very much. And we do have a motion on the table. I don't see any further questions or comments. I think we've had a pretty fulsome discussion. So I'll pull council, starting with Councillor Cole-Hamilton.
Well, I'd said earlier that I would favor option 2, so I believe option 1 is on the table, so I will not vote in favor of that.
Fair enough. Councillor Frisch.
Opposed.
Councillor Hillian.
Opposed.
Councillor McCollum.
Also opposed.
Councillor Morin.
Opposed.
Councillor Theos.
Opposed.
And I'll be opposed as well. Would somebody like to make a subsequent motion?
I'll move option 2, Mr. Mayor.
Okay.
Second.
That's seconded by Councillor Cole-Hamilton. We have had a fulsome discussion. Does anybody have anything to add before we poll council? Seeing none, starting with Councillor Cole-Hamilton.
Actually, I was going to add something, Mayor.
Oh, sure.
There's been some discussion about about seeing whether there might be some greater movement on the parkland in the area, which is currently subject to the I'm losing the word. Anyway, the covenant, that's the word I'm looking for. Mr. Fitzgerald said it might be possible during this time to go back and sort of continue that discussion with the landowner. I see that as having merit in terms of long-term preservation to this area, especially given that it borders the creek and the agricultural land reserve. So I'm not sure if that would require an amendment to option 2. Would that be the case, or have staff noted that this is anyway?
Yeah.
What would be the way of moving of ensuring that that's a step that is taken?
I guess just to jump in there, excuse me, through CAO to Mayor and Council. So I would recommend option 3 in that case. And the reason for that is just to clarify exactly what would be dedicated and what would be zoned specifically as PA2, and then have that come back with an updated staff report showing that area. So option 3 to defer requesting additional information.
And Mayor, I realize we have a motion on the table currently, so having heard that, I guess I don't actually, it would be option 3 that would be the appropriate way to move forward. So I will not support option 2.
Okay, fair enough. Councillor Morin.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I'm more in favor, I think, of option 3 as well, because I know that we have on occasion asked to have some involvement from our conservation groups in terms of even some consultation. I'd just like to be a little bit more reassured, maybe getting some feedback from those groups around that salmon bearing stream. I don't know if that maybe could be included if we went with option 3 to take a look at that.
Okay, thanks. And Councillor Hillian.
Thank you, Mayor. And just a question for staff. If we passed option 2 and went ahead with a public hearing, presumably individuals such as the stream keepers and also the proponent could come forward and state their views at that time, and it would still provide council with time to weigh in on any potential changes. But there might actually be a rationale that the proponent could present at a public hearing, and we don't know. We're told that the stream keepers have in fact been consulted and would be consulted further. So I'm just wondering whether a public hearing might satisfy some of council's wishes in this regard.
All right, thanks. And Councillor Frisch.
Thanks, Mayor. I feel, or I suspect that putting this decision off and going for option 3 might be excessively onerous on the landowner, considering the lengths that they've already gone to meet the requirements of the city. And of course, I think this council in a lot of ways in our desires to be more environmentally responsible. And I'd also like to point out that, because of the annexation 8 years ago, there are some limitations on how much we can affect the development in this area. I think this is maybe even one of the better developments I've seen come through for this area, for the Buckstone area, or the Ridge area as they call it now, because of their attempt to increase the riparian area setback and position their lot plan so that a lot of trees can be retained. So I'm going to probably agree with Councillor Hillian and think that there is an opportunity, if there is an opportunity to do better than what's proposed right here, that will reveal itself through the public hearing. Thanks.
All right, thanks very much. So that did generate quite a lot of discussion. So I will begin polling council unless Mr. Kushner, do the comments that Councillor Hillian had about getting an adequate amount of feedback from concerned organizations. Did you have any, or Mr. Buck just put his hand up as well, so.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I was actually going to defer to Mr. Buck as to which option he might think is the best route to go.
Yeah, I'll just, I guess, throw my 2 cents in here. I think going with option 2 and the applicant having heard the discussion, allowing for that further input that both Councillor Hillian and Frisch identified, will provide going forward to third reading options that the applicant will want to consider. I will just add that during the discussion, I quickly looked at our files. We've referred at this point both to the Comox Valley Conservation Partnership, who said they had no additional comments at this time. My expectation is, and based on past experience, they typically look for the further detail when the stormwater management planning is done. In this instance, we have the 30-meter setback proposed, which will be a covenanted area with a fence, but it's highly likely there'll be stormwater infrastructure that then goes into the creek area that they'll want to pay good attention to. Ministry of Environment comments, they're generally very high level. They just referred to, and I forget the species, a particular frog or toad that this type of riparian area provides good habitat for. They're not identified there now, but they're identifying in their mapping as a potential area for further habitat. That's where they came in. But I do think, again, going forward with option 2, having that further dialogue through the public hearing with the public, and then having the applicant revisit the options based on what they hear from council at that time is probably more prudent.
Okay. Thanks for that. I appreciate it. I think we've got some fulsome knowledge here, so I will continue forward with polling council, starting with Councillor Cole Hamilton.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mayor. And just for a moment, I just wanted to acknowledge I appreciate Mr. Buck's guidance on this. It helps us, I think, find a good path through this and a balance between getting some public input and having the opportunity to explore more options with the owner. So I would be supporting option 2 then. Thank you.
Excellent. Councillor Frisch.
In favor.
Councillor Hillian.
In favor.
Councillor McCollum.
In favor.
Excellent. I would say some building up to anyways, Councillor Moran, moving right along.
In favor.
Thank you. Councillor Theos.
I'll be in favor.
Actually, I'll be in favor as well. Anticipation is the word I was looking for, building up for anticipation for the answer. That is unanimous, and I think that does give some clarity and some guidance moving forward. And next we have the briefing note for the rec guides.
Move receipt.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. I will pass this over to Dave Snyder to summarize the briefing note and answer any questions that council may have.
Thank you to the CEO, to Mayor and Council. Oh, turn on my video. Thank you to the CEO, to Mayor and Council. There is not a lot of discussion to have now after having gone through the lengthy discussions we've already had. However, this briefing note was just to inform Council of the rec guide coming out in advance of the staff reports you just saw. The rec guide is a regional document that is produced cooperatively among our partners, and the timing is a little bit immovable in terms of coordination of all of the program offerings across the region. So just wanted council to be aware that that you might be receiving one at home and that a report would be forthcoming. Kind of outdated news now. I'll take any questions if you have any.
Fair enough. I'm not seeing any questions at this moment in time. So with that, I'll just poll council, starting with Councillor Cole-Hamilton.
In favor.
Councillor Frisch.
In favor of receipt.
Councillor Hillian.
In favor of receipt.
Councillor McCollum.
In favor.
Councillor Moran.
In favor.
Councillor Theos.
In favor.
I'm in favor as well. Excellent. Thanks, everybody. And we already did the 5th Street rehabilitation as well. So moving into reports from council, starting with Councillor Cole-Hamilton, if you had anything. And I think he just vanished. Well, maybe we'll continue on. Councillor Frisch.
No, I don't think I have anything to report at this time. Thanks.
Excellent. Councillor Hillian.
Thanks, Mayor. I'll just note 2 things I have sent in my report. One, I did meet with representatives of the Hotel Workers Union last week, as I believe the mayor also did, and to hear their concerns about recall provisions. And it sounds like the province is actually moving on that, which was good news. But I did indicate that I would mention to council that I did meet with them, and this is a population of workers that have been significantly impacted by COVID-19 and are of course concerned that they want to make sure that as their employers open up, that they have the ability to be recalled into their jobs, particularly older workers who've been there for some time. The second thing I wanted to mention, I did share with members of council who don't sit on the regional board that there are changes taking place to the regional district organics program, and it'll be dealt with at the Comox Strathcona Waste Management meeting this Thursday. As a result of procurement issues, they're having to re-advertise to get a builder, and looking at a delay of 6 months so that it would not open until the fall of 2022, and a $0.8 million increase in the expenses. So I know it's of interest to all of us. That's why I bring it to council's attention. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Hillian. Councillor McCollum.
I don't have anything to report on tonight. Thanks.
That's okay. Councillor Moran.
No, nothing to report. Thank you.
Councillor Theos.
I'll pass. Thank you very much for asking.
Excellent. And Councillor Cole-Hamilton, you vanished for a second, but you're back. So just seeing if you have any reports or updates.
My only report is that every hour and 10 minutes, my laptop shuts itself down, and I'm bringing it into IT on Thursday. So that's, other than that, no major reports.
There you go. It could be overheating. Maybe put it in an ice tray or something like that. For myself, as Councillor Hillian mentioned, I did meet with the hotel workers, and I think one of the things of note is that you know, they're traveling around the province. They're talking to leaders, obviously at multiple levels, and I think, you know, they are really looking out for a lot of people that have been affected by the whole COVID-19, and really looking at ways that, although it might be something very specific for their industry, that might actually be able to benefit other industries as well. So it was a really good conversation. Also met with MP Gord Johns, with Councillor Frisch actually, and had a good conversation there. I think, you know, just really talking about how businesses are being supported federally, and some of the work that obviously he's doing as an MP, and more specifically, I guess, you know, the focus of the NDP party as it relates to federal policies and stuff. So I think we've been represented relatively well by MP Gord Johns on a variety of issues, whether it be environmental, economic, or otherwise. And so I really want to thank him for taking the time to meet with me. And I think with that, we can move on to resolutions of council. And first up, we have Councillor Morin.
Great, thank you, Mayor. I'd like to move, whereas the onset of COVID-19 has created significant challenges for local businesses, and in some cases has contributed to their permanent closures, whereas businesses are adapting to these challenges by reducing costs such as rent, by working from home, and the city's zoning bylaws considered restrictive in the types of allowable home occupations, particularly in relation to other local jurisdictions. And whereas the City of Courtenay has joined with other local governments to implement a COVID economic recovery task force and has identified economic growth as a strategic priority, therefore be it resolved that Council expand support of small business by directing staff to look at options for an amendment to the zoning bylaw to expand permitted home occupations to include, but is not limited to, hairdressing, dog grooming, counseling, massage, and acupuncture, and other such businesses that do not create additional noise and parking challenges. And if someone seconds it, I will speak to it a little bit. Thank you.
All right, it's been seconded. So if you want to speak to it, Councillor Morin, you have the floor.
Yeah, so obviously this came out of a lot of concerns that were coming forward from particularly small business owners who have really been hit hard financially throughout COVID. Some of them had actually wanted to have home-based businesses prior to that and found that the bylaw was very restrictive in terms of the allowable businesses. And I have to say I've had a ton of support come forward since this was presented as a notice of motion. I believe I've only had one person, I think only one person in opposition to it. And I do take their points. I do see that side of it, but I really do think that the benefits of expanding our bylaw far outweigh the negatives. And a couple points I'll make is that in terms of small businesses starting at home, or in this case with COVID, maybe moving back into moving to the home, helps people to not lose their shirt, to not be in a position where they're so financially harmed that they can't even pay maybe their residential property taxes. So I guess the argument of some is that we're taking away from the commercial tax base by expanding this. I think that by not doing that, we can be creating hardship for people, even making those residential property tax commitments. So, and of course, commercial businesses do have a lot of services and benefits that they get with with the commercial taxes that they pay that a home-based business wouldn't get, whether that's drive-by traffic or being able to have more employees or a lot more leeway with what they can do with their business. So the other thing that I wanted to note, and I know that I'm often the gender equity person, but it was brought up to me by many of the home-based business folks that that the majority of home-based businesses are actually run by women, and we know that equity in terms of caring for children and running the household is much better than in the past. We have lots of stay-at-home dads and fathers stepping up, but we do see that women primarily do take the burden of care, whether that's care for children or care for elders, and it certainly makes it easier for women with home-based business to juggle those things if they're working from home. So those were a couple of the points I wanted to make. If we help out in this regard, hopefully many of those small businesses will expand and grow and be successful and will be renting a storefront at some point down the road and be contributing even more to the economy than they already do. I also wanted to say that many commercial landlords unfortunately didn't take advantage of the government assistance that was provided. So I know myself, I'm a commercial landlady, I guess, and we did apply for the benefits so that our tenant had a substantial cut in the rent that they needed to pay, which really I think did help keep our commercial tenant afloat. But there was not an uptake of that program, unfortunately, nationally, and I don't understand why. To me, it's a benefit to keep your tenant in place and help them out so that they can rent from you long term. But many of these businesses did not have landlords take advantage of that, and it's huge overhead for a small struggling business. So those are the main points I wanted to make. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Morin, and I think that's one of the big things in terms of a takeaway, and we're dealing with this the Economic Recovery Task Force and businesses in general, that if you look at the wage subsidy program, it's like 70 or 80% of businesses across Canada are taking advantage of it, but the rent commercial rent relief program, I think it's like under 20% or under 15%. Like it's really underutilized. And there are rules around it, which again, as part of the conversation with Gord Johns the other day, they're pushing the government to try to fill those cracks where people seem to be falling into, and their building for some reason either isn't eligible or something silly. But the fact that they didn't make that available directly to tenants, I think is been a real oversight, but we can't fix that today. I'll go into questions, starting with Councillor McCollum.
Thanks, Mayor, and thank you very much to Councillor Morin for bringing this motion to Council. I think it's going to do a lot to serve some home-based businesses or some other small businesses that could really benefit from downsizing some of their costs during these times. So I'm very much in support of it. I do have a question for staff. One of the emails that we received in feedback to this was concerning a limitation that there is only the possibility for one business license to be held per residence. And I want to verify that that's in fact correct, because I didn't go looking for the bylaw myself when we received the email, and also whether or not that's another thing that can get some consideration in the staff report, is whether or not we need to consider some allowance for two valid self-employed people to be operating out of the same house. If staff have the answer to that off the top.
Mayor, maybe that's a good question, and maybe I'll pass this over to Ian for his comment.
Thanks very much. I think Matt was quickly trying to search the bylaw there. My guess, and he can correct me if he's found something, is that we do, in all likelihood, for home-based business, only allow one license, and that would have a lot to do with parking and impacts on the neighborhood of potentially people coming and going. Staff are supportive of the amendments that are proposed. Something that with the upcoming following the OCP zoning bylaw we would have been looking at. But we always have to keep in mind that the intent of a home is the residential character, and we don't want it to be overtaken with commercial nature. So that's likely a restriction, but I see Matt's got his mic on, so maybe he's found something.
Yeah, thanks, Ian. There's not a specific clause in there saying one business per dwelling. It does say that it has to be carried out by occupants of the dwelling. So that may be the restriction that's being referred to. But certainly, either way, we can look at this as part of the review.
Great. Yeah, thank you. That's helpful.
Sounds good. Excellent. And Councillor Cole-Hamilton.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Not a question. I just wanted to thank Councillor Moran for bringing this up. It's extremely timely. It's something we'd heard about a little bit before COVID and much more during COVID. And this seems like we're bringing our zoning bylaws into the 21st century of the gig economy, where many people are working partially from home and people in the COVID era increasingly from home. And I think one of the things I've noticed is that people moving to the valley from other places, often the reason they're able to move here is because they do plan to work from home and have a job they can bring with them. And I think this will make it just a little bit easier. So I see a nice economic development angle there, as well as social justice, and just it's just time. So thank you.
Thanks very much, Councillor Cole-Hamilton. And Councillor Theos.
Hi, I like the idea about people working from home and trying to make a living from in any way they possibly can. And the question of equity also is raised in my mind of if this is the scenario, then people from the small entrepreneurship sector have said for many years that they don't feel that they should be paying any more taxes than residential homeowners. And that question, is the question in my mind. If we're going to be moving in this direction, is somebody that is going to be working in an office, is somebody that's going to be working in a very small little operation of the same nature that is in a commercial spot, going to be paying much greater taxes? That is going to be the defining question to me, is that, you want to do it in fairness. If the people working from home are suggesting that there is no increased traffic or very little increased traffic and very increased use of the services, then I don't disagree with that. I think that's probably correct in many ways. But if that's the case, then how do we justify charging the people that are doing the same kind of businesses through either an office or a small little venture, little spot, just because it's designated commercial, and then we charge them 3.5 times the amount that we would charge someone doing the same thing from a residential? So I think we have to really think deeply on how we're moving forward with this concept in fairness.
Thanks, Councillor Theos. Councillor Hillian.
Thanks, Mayor, and thanks to Councillor Moran again for bringing this forward. I will support the motion, but I know that the devil is in the details. And one of the very good points that the writer who wrote in opposition to us mentioned is that in her home, where she runs her home-based business, she pays commercial taxes on the portion of the home that is used as a business. And I'm assuming that staff will look into this and build these aspects into the any bylaw changes, and that people who want to do home-based businesses realize that there will be an increased tax burden that will go along with that. I agree with Councillor Theos that it would be unfair to go otherwise, but presumably that's something that staff will be able to fully inform us on if we do get a staff report. Thanks.
Excellent. Yeah, good comment. And I know for any businesses, even if they're not home based, but even if you just do some things at home, Revenue Canada does give you the ability to say you're using a portion of your home for doing business, et cetera, for your, and I'm saying Revenue Canada, but basically for your business taxes. Yeah, I think there might be some potential for making sure that we capture some of that, whether by having a minimum amount or utilizing whatever they're providing to their accountants, so that we know that it is actually the amount that is consistent. Councillor Morin.
Thanks, Mayor. Yeah, I just wanted to note, I know it's going to come out in the report that you know, there was some initial research done by many folks around comparisons to other jurisdictions. And so I'm sure it'll be part of the investigation on how that's impacting other local jurisdictions, because I don't believe that they're charging extra taxes or whatever. And I haven't heard of major hardships in those areas for opening up extra. Really, we're just adding more allowable, categories, I guess. So that comparison to other local jurisdictions, I think, will be an important piece. And I certainly wouldn't want to see the level of commercial tax to what I have to pay for someone operating without the services that I get. I mean, that's the other aspect. It needs to be in relation to also what you're getting. The other point that was brought up to me was with COVID, those that are doing, many of the businesses that want these changes that aren't allowed are counselors, massage therapists, people like that, who are having to do major cleaning. And I mean, they've had to do huge adaptations, which is costing them a lot of money. They have way fewer clients, etc. So that's why I really think that we need to consider, if we're going to do this, giving people a break, because that's what they need, because people are their businesses are going under. So thanks.
Okay. And Councillor Theos.
Thanks again, Mayor. I appreciate it. I really think Councillor Hillian and Mayor Wells, that you've both combined with your comments, hit the nail on the head. I really appreciate those comments, because this is about potentially shifting to some degree about how people are doing business. And you know, the people that we're talking about are really borderline just making it to some, you know, to the most degree. They're just trying to do their best to feed their families and to make it day by day. And many of them are working in small offices and small little businesses, functioning with very little capital and barely making it. And they may want to remain in those little locations, because we'd hope they will remain in those locations to some degree. Because if you take people from their office spaces and move them into their home-based businesses, there is a degree that we lose some of that activity that may be in offices, whether it's downtown or other areas. If you look at Ottawa right now, being that with COVID hitting them hard in their downtown core, a lot of that was due to a lot of people from their offices shifting to their homes. And economics, could mean that is a little bit more profitable for them and convenient. But again, if we lose that activity of office space that may be downtown, we may lose more than what we bargained for. So in order to counter that, I feel if there was a shared cost between all the users, whether they're living in a residential or commercial or office space, and paying a shared cost, everybody walks away a winner, and we don't end up picking winners and losers. So I just want staff to keep that in mind.
Excellent, thanks. And I don't see any other further questions or comments. I think we had a relatively fulsome discussion, and it's going to be coming back to us again. So I'll poll council, starting with Councillor Cole-Hamilton. I'll move on to Councillor Frisch.
In favor.
Councillor Hillian.
In favor.
Councillor McCullum.
Unmute is not cooperating with me tonight. I'm in favor.
Excellent. Well, at least your computer's not turning off every hour and a half on you. Councillor Morin.
In favor.
And thanks again for bringing this forward. Councillor Theos.
I'm in support.
And back to Councillor Cole-Hamilton. I'm not sure if he's locked out. I'll vote in favor. And Mr. Ritz, I don't know how it works from a technical perspective if someone's not able to come forward. Oh, there's Councillor.
Sorry. My apologies, Mayor. In favor, please.
Okay. All right. Thanks very much. All right. That is unanimous. And thanks everybody for that great discussion. Next, we have Councillor McCullum.
Thanks, Mayor. I'll read. Whereas the impact of wood smoke to local air quality and health is a major concern in our community, and whereas the proper storage of wood and operation of a wood burning appliance significantly reduces the negative impacts on local air quality, therefore be it resolved that Council directs staff to prepare a report to consider options for a bylaw to address nuisance wood burning and ensure responsible storage and operation of wood burning appliances.
Someone could second that. Thank you, Councillor Frisch. And did you want to speak to it, Councillor McCollum?
Yeah, I would just briefly. Yeah, just for the benefit of staff, the intent of bringing this motion forward is basically to provide both city staff and residents with a tool for being able to raise concerns around problem houses in neighborhoods and to provide our bylaw staff with the ability to address those complaints. It's something that we don't have right now. I think the vast majority of emails that council has received on this topic have been around specific problem neighbors not burning their wood responsibly for one reason or another. But basically what it results in is one neighbor in your neighborhood that's basically smoking everybody out. And with a lot of the initiatives that we're trying to get done, we're looking to add more and more people to existing neighborhoods, and we need some tools in place in order to address these problems. So that's what I'm hoping we'll be able to do by looking at this. I did provide a link to an old UBCM document that was called Regulating Wood Burning Appliances. And there's 2 pages in it, specifically page 28 and 29, that talk about this type of bylaw and ways that it can be enforced and some of the tools that are in place in other municipalities. So I think that would be a great starting point for us. Also earlier today, we received an email from Comox Valley Breathe Clean Air Comox Valley requesting slightly different wording in this motion. They didn't, they no longer use the word nuisance, pointing out that nuisance is really kind of minimizing the importance of people being able to breathe clean air, and that it is a pollutant and a known, it has major impacts to some people's health. But I did leave nuisance in because it is commonly used in bylaws to as a tool for addressing these residences. So I think it provides better clarity than the wording that they had asked for, which was undue. I'm just trying to find. Sorry, I did print this off. I think it was undue wood smoke, undue smoke emissions, but I think nuisance burning is more clear. They would also like us to consider a wider range of options, including no burn days. which I do think that should be looked at some point in time, but I think this is a good first step, and we do still have the regional airshed advisory, and perhaps that's something that will come from them, but as something that we can deal with as a municipality through bylaw, I think this is probably the most rational way for us to proceed. So that's why I've left the motion as is, and I'll leave it at that.
Excellent, thanks very much. And we've got Councillor Hillian.
Thank you, Mayor. Thanks to Councillor McCollum for bringing this forward. We've been struggling with what to do about air quality for a number of years, and I think we've held back from taking action at the municipal level while we worked on a regional basis to set up an air quality roundtable and working group. And that process is underway, but it's taken a long time. And it's become apparent that with that Air Quality Council just really taking shape over the last couple of months, I don't know if it's actually met yet, that there won't be any recommendations for action coming forward for yet another burning season. And yet we continue to get serious complaints from householders with health problems who live next door or down the street from someone who either has an ineffective wood stove or burns damp wood. And we have no tools at our disposal to address that, whether it's to approach the individual and suggest modifications that they might incorporate, education that they might take advantage of, support that they might find through grant programs and such. So I think it's timely that this comes forward, but I am concerned about the potential bind that it puts staff in to possibly be working at cross purposes with the air quality roundtable. I don't know who our staff representative is to that group, but I'd be interested in comments from staff about where they might see this in terms of doability. I'm also aware that as we call upon more issues to be dealt with through bylaw enforcement, we have limited capacity in that department as well. So I think all of these things need to be addressed, but I think it would be very, very helpful if staff were able to provide us with a report that gave us some idea or gave us some tools that we could use to address these situations that some people feel are imperiling their health in our community.
Thanks. Mr. Kushner, did you want to respond?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. To answer a couple of those questions, Chris Davidson sits on that roundtable as a city representative. He will be working closely with Kate O'Connell, who incidentally started today. She's drinking from the fire hose, as they say, but she started today, and she comes with an extensive background. And in fact, her and I spoke today about this potential resolution, and that this will be a priority for her. So she has some background and experience in very similar air quality bylaws. So I don't see any reason why we can't turn this around in a reasonable time.
Excellent.
Thank you.
And I think, some of the frustration, I think that, for myself, we did kind of have a goal of having some preliminary discussions and even suggestions, I believe, some actionable items, I think was the term, by last October. Or by the last burning season, and here we are basically a year after that, and we are still waiting. And I think unfortunately it is just sometimes the slow pace of getting things done. But I have been in discussions. Been contacted by some of the folks that are selling wood stoves. There were some that were quite upset about the us stopping wood stove in new buildings. The person that I spoke to said that it's a significant amount of their business. in Courtenay, but when I spoke to our staff, it didn't seem like it was something that would impact new buildings in Courtenay nearly to that level, which is why I think we took that step earlier. From my perspective, when it comes to having good wood, unfortunately, probably one of the only ways that can happen is if the industry itself regulates itself and creates its own source of wood that it can basically provide to wood stove owners, because especially in a municipality, people can't just go in their backyard and cut down their trees because we have a tree bylaw for that. You have to season it properly. It's near impossible to do that, I think, for a lot of people in Courtenay. And that seems to be one of the big issues, is actually that clean source of wood. And again, I think that's it's a huge challenge, and not one that the municipality wants to take on. It really should be up to the industry to regulate it itself. So, and they've seen this train coming down the tracks for many years now. So I don't think it should be a surprise. Again, want to thank Councillor McCollum for bringing this forward. And with that, we'll poll council. So starting with Councillor Cole-Hamilton.
In favor.
Councillor Frisch.
In favor.
Councillor Hillian.
In favor.
Councillor McCollum.
In favor.
Councillor Morin.
In favor.
Councillor Theos.
I'm in favor.
And I'm in favor as well. Excellent. Moving right along, in camera.
Yeah, I'll move this if you like, Mayor. I'll move that a special in-camera meeting closed to the public will be held September 8th, 2020 at the conclusion of the regular council meeting pursuant to the following subsections of the community charter. Section 91C, labor relations and other employee relations. 91G, litigation and potential litigation affecting the municipality. And 91I, the receipt of advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose.
I'll second that.
Excellent. We'll poll council, starting with Councillor Cole-Hamilton.
In favor.
Councillor Frisch.
In favor.
Councillor Hillian.
In favor.
Councillor McCollum.
In favor.
Councillor Morin.
In favor.
Councillor Theos.
Support.
And I'm in favor as well. Excellent. Moving along to bylaws, first and second reading.
Yeah, I'm happy to move these. Just want to make sure that that's what's next in this process with the option 2 that we had passed.
Well, I believe Fraser Road might be postponed. Mr. Richta, just to confirm.
Thank you, Mayor. It is for first and second reading as part of option 2.
That's what I thought. Okay, so I'll go ahead and move zoning amendment bylaw number 2989-2020, which is for 4070 Fraser Road, pass first and second reading.
Seconded.
Excellent. I'll poll council, starting with Councillor Cole-Hamilton.
In favor.
Councillor Frisch.
In favor.
Councillor Hillian.
In favor.
Councillor McCollum.
In favor.
Councillor Morin.
In favor.
Councillor Theos.
Support.
And I'm in favor as well. Excellent. Unanimous. And next we have Thorpe Avenue.
I'll move this one, Mayor. Move zoning amendment bylaw number 3012-2020, Thorpe Avenue, pass, so what do we check? First and second reading.
Second.
Excellent. I'll poll council, starting with Councillor Cole-Hamilton.
In favor.
Councillor Frisch.
In favor.
Councillor Hillian.
In favor.
Councillor McCollum.
In favor.
Councillor Morin.
In favor.
Councillor Theos.
I'm in favor.
And I'm in favor as well. And for first, second, and third reading.
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor, I have to absent myself on bylaw number 3019. So I'll just excuse myself. Thank you.
All right, thanks for that.
I'm in the same boat.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Morin. I think Eric will put you guys out in the waiting room or something.
I was going to ask if this is coming on this agenda because it was open for public review. Is that why it's coming now?
Mayor, I'll defer this to Jennifer Nelson.
Hi there. Thank you through the interim CAO to mayor and council. So council already reviewed and approved all the permissive tax exemptions at the last council meeting. So there's a statutory process to go through. So we've compiled all that information into the bylaws, and after receiving 3 readings tonight, then we have to move on to statutory advertising. And then we'll bring the bylaws back for final adoption in October before the deadline of October 31st.
Okay, and can we move all 3 readings at once?
Yes, you can.
If you don't mind, Mayor, I'll move that tax exemption 2021 bylaw number 3019-2020 pass first, second, and third reading.
Second.
Excellent. I'll poll council, starting with Councillor Cole Hamilton.
In favor.
Councillor Frisch.
In favor.
Councillor Hillian is out. Councillor McCollum.
In favor.
Councillor Moran is also out. Councillor Theos.
I'll be in favor.
Excellent. I'm in favor as well. So we can, I'm not sure. So the churches one, I believe Councillor Moran and Hillian can be here for those ones. So we'll just wait for them to return. All right. The tax exemption for churches.
I'll move that tax exemption churches 2021 bylaw number 3020-2020 pass first, second, and third reading.
Second.
Excellent. That's been first and seconded. I'll poll council, starting with Councillor Cole Hamilton.
In favor.
Councillor Frisch.
In favor.
Some anticipation there. Councillor Hillian.
In favor.
Councillor McCollum.
In favor.
Councillor Moran.
In favor.
Councillor Theos.
I'll be in favor.
And I'm in favor as well. One thing left besides the crickets.
Move adjournment.
Second.
Excellent. I'll poll council, starting with Councillor Cole Hamilton.
Still in favor.
Frisch.
I don't know.
Councillor Hillian.
In favor.
Councillor McCollum.
In favor.
Councillor Moran.
In favor.
Councillor Theos.
I support that.
I'll be in favor as well. So I'm not sure what Councillor Frisch's answer was, but we did get a majority nonetheless. I just want to point out we're at about the 3.5 hour mark for those that have been watching the entire video. Thanks for being part of it, and obviously thanks everybody tonight for the council meeting.
How many people were watching it?